Doooovid here with the week in review. We are live with Jennifer, Church of Entropy, and this is episode 45. Usually we do this on Jennifer's channel, almost every week. Besides the year in review we did this week, I guess there was some sort of technical issue on her channel, so last minute we're doing it on my channel. Maybe she had some sort of strike, so if Jennifer wants to explain that real quick, she can, and then we'll go in and I'll tell maybe a quick spiritual lesson. We'll sing a mantra and get into it.
Yeah, hey everyone. Sorry about switching up the channels for this week. We're going to be rebroadcasting this on my channel once I get my strike taken off, which I guess is going to be this coming week. So I guess there's some music in one of the clips I uploaded that was bad news. So that's what happened to me, but we're just going to go forward. And there's been a bit of audio problems on my end, but hopefully the high-pitched sound has fixed itself, sort of, a little bit. Anyway, back over to you, Doooovid, for the introduction. Thanks so much for being here and hosting the show with your channel.
Okay, yeah, so thanks for tuning in. We got a few people, and hopefully some of the regulars, if anyone's expecting the show or contact Jennifer, they'll figure out that it's here. You'll be able to direct them here. So let me do a screen share. We'll open up with a chant and a little spiritual lesson today. We celebrated Shivaratri, which I guess there's different understandings, called like the appearance day of Lord Shiva, or possibly the marriage of Shiva to Parvati, and I think it was actually early this week, and we just celebrated today. So I thought I'd do a Hindu chant, and so this character here, this we'll call him a sage. I'm not sure. Have you ever seen this man here, Kripaluja Maharaj, Jennifer?
That was my first time.
Your first time? Okay, so let me just read a quick bio. He passed away a few years ago, and he had these wonderful bhajans. He's probably one of the most famous chanting leaders in India. Born in Sharad Purnima, the full moon, in 1922. At the age of 16, he makes his way to Vrindavan, the holy city where Krishna spent his youth. And 17 years old, he continuously chants Hare Krishna for 6 months straight. And this is when he's a kid. Eventually, he becomes, there's a convention of prominent leaders and sages, and they declare him to be, Jagat Guru, master of the world, head sage, from his knowledge. And he creates a huge network and expansion of temples around India, and has big chanting. So show a few things. Here's his disciple here. I'm going to put this in the chat. This is Nikhil-Anand, and I think I met him. He's an interesting character. I know people who know him. So if people have a hard time with ISKCON Bhagavad Gita, he's got his own series on Bhagavad Gita, and he was a disciple of Jaguru Kripaluja, and he speaks Hindi and Sanskrit, and he's, I think, in Queens, New York. He's head of a temple there, but he travels around and he sings bhajan. He's talking. He's very intelligent, and explains these Hindu concepts, specifically about Krishna, in a very nice way. So if anyone's interested in that, this would have been him when he was alive. He passed away a few years ago, leading chanting, and I was going to chant this actually mantra, although a different tune, Radha Radhe Govinda, which is a pretty popular Hindu chant. A lot of times these chants are just the names of gods. So are you familiar with that, Jennifer, Radhe Radhe Govinda, that chant?
I've heard it a few times, yeah.
Let me just Govinda are names of Vishnu. So Govinda is another name for Vishnu, or protector of the cows, usually referring to Krishna. So, kind of like the feminine side of God, which would be Radhe, and then Govinda, more referring to the cows, or could refer to the 5 senses. So this guy Kripaluja, I guess he was more a disciple of Radhe than Krishna, but he had these interesting chants. So let me just get to the chants. So chant the names of the Lord. It's always good to chant the names of the Lord, and different forms of the Lord, or chant things for a different purpose. So this mantra here, Radhe Radhe Govinda, sing the ISKCON versions. There's a tune in ISKCON that they sing very common, and actually goes to a different song that the words are very powerful. It's like a lamentation about, okay, how come I don't take life seriously enough? How come all my desires for these material things, and I have no desire for spiritual longing. But the words are put to this Radhe Radhe Govinda. So, Radhe Radhe Govinda, Govinda Radhe, Radhe Radhe Govinda, Govinda Radhe. We're actually chanting that earlier today in temple. It's a good tune to you could kind of sing as high as you possibly could. A good congregational tune, family tune for all generations to sing together. Anyone ISKCON's probably familiar with that tune. They also sing it to Hare Krishna. Jaguru Kripaluja had a few different tunes. He had multiple different tunes because he had a lot of ones. He had this. I guess it was sung with like a high part that would have been sung by the women, and the other part that he would sing with the. So it's slipping me right now. I didn't prepare it. So Radhe Radhe Jai Radhe Govinda, Govinda Govinda Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Jai Radhe Govinda, Govinda. I just always enjoy those chants. Hopefully set a nice mood for discussion. So I'm not sure if you want to add something to that, or we could jump right in.
Thanks for that, Doooovid. Really appreciate the introduction. And yeah, I'm ready to start with the show. Been a pretty interesting week. A lot of stuff going on. How's your week been?
Pretty good. I had almost nothing to do with streaming this week. There was Democratic debates. I did part 2 of my Shared Future America with the Jewish community and the Muslim community, and it was a little bit interesting. Some related stuff, just talking about separation of religion and state, and such things like why the Islamic community generally favors gay rights or things like that. So we discussed the experts and professors of American culture discuss these trends, and so I put that on my YouTube page. So if someone wants more scholarship, I put I'm not sure if you ever heard of IQ, Intelligence Squared. They actually make in-life debates and events, but they just had a debate this week on identity politics is tearing society apart. And let me do a screen share again real quick. I want to show something. Some of my streaming may be coming applicable in real life. So I got my picture in the Jewish news, so they could see me. Here's an event, and that's me. And they're presenting their kind of like Deborah Lipstadt like PowerPoints on anti-Semitism. It was kind of funny because it was like clearly like Deborah Lipstadt talking points, the type stuff you see on No More News. But we had an event in Detroit, and they screened this movie, White Right Meeting the Enemy, with Dia Khan. She interviews a lot of the people from the alt-right, some of Richard Spencer, some of the people I've had run-ins with on YouTube, and then we had a discussion afterward with Repair the World, Tikkun Olam, and it got written up in the Detroit Jewish News. So I thought that was a good event. It was a good discussion because bringing into real life some of these stuff we're talking about in YouTube into real life meetups and discussion groups. So I had a few things to talk about in advancements of ideas. I did catch that John Mark stream, and we're going to talk about that, the new propitarianism, just because the map and it's related to my predator prey model for group conflict. And Joe Rogan had a Hare Krishna guy in his show this week, so I thought those would be interesting things to talk about. So what's new with you? And maybe we'll have some other guests or people in the chat if they want to come on and add some more. If Jon Vance wants to come on and talk about his falling out with secular Quranism, that's fine. Also,
yeah, I saw that. John posted a under 2-minute video denouncing secular Quranism.
I don't even mind if Claire wants to come on and we could since I guess we're not on your channel, my channel, maybe we'll even let Claire or John come on. But did you want to do your week in review real quick, and then we could talk about how we're going to do, if you want to bring John and Claire on right away, or if you want to talk some science.
Thanks, Doooovid. All right, well, I have been working on my blog, which I have a couple of different sort of spots that I'll share what I've been working on most recently in the chat there, and people can have a look at that, hopefully enjoy it. We're not going to do a big digression into them this week because it's easier if I can do it off my OBS there, so we'll just let people get familiar with it and be going into that more. So enjoy. There's not a whole lot there, but what is there I think is quite good quality, and just give yourself some time, kind of clear your mind, and you don't have to agree with the ideas instantly, but might do you some good to consider them. That's all I'm saying, and we'll go over them at a leisurely pace on the show for so long as Doooovid.
I just did a quick screen share so you could see. Here is the School of Entropy WordPress, and right now there's a link to 5, 6, 7 different PowerPoints on it. Psychological model number 1, quantum philosophy lessons 1, 2, 3, and 4, cognitive dissonance, which you covered last week or 2 weeks ago, and then entropy, which you covered last week. So I'm sure there's going to be more added to that, and we're going to be talking about that quite a bit. But if anyone is in a hurry to see that, I dropped the link in the chat. Jennifer did also. Oops, I put the wrong one. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I really hope people enjoyed them. I sure enjoyed writing them. It's not the form that it originally came out in. It kind of required some talking it over and over and over. So I appreciate the people who let me bounce ideas off them out there that know who they are. So hope everyone enjoys it, really. And I'm always open to questions, as you guys know. Ryan, nice to see you again. Josh, Culture Bear, Vance, Claire. I guess it's unsurprising to see you guys here. Yeah, sorry if I missed anyone, and hope you all enjoy the show. Woohoo! Yeah, so I've already sent the link to Vincent and Gandalf.
Okay, and I guess I get to StreamYards is easier to approve, so I might even just put the link in the chat for.
Sounds great.
Okay, so I'm just going to put the StreamYards link in the chat for John or Claire if they want to come on. So let me just get this off my screen and do the quick screen share. I thought it was pretty interesting, see Karma working out interesting, and almost do a review. It's a 3-hour video, so if people watch Joe Rogan, I guess he's pretty popular. People who've been on Luke Ford show, and he's kind of like the biggest streamer, I guess the biggest in the game of this. People are doing, and has mainstream fame. So he had a Hare Krishna devotee of Radhanath Swami, interesting, Rughunath Kapo, and I guess they know each other going way back. So this guy was part of, I guess, what they call like the straight edge, these Hare Krishnas that had these like punk rock bands in the 80s, and they were Hare Krishnas, but at the same time they had punk rock bands, and I think they had something to do with Rage Against the Machine. Like they played together with the people that eventually founded the group Rage Against the Machine, if anyone remembers them. But they talked with Joe Rogan about almost 3 hours. The very end, Joe Rogan says Hare Krishna. He asks questions about reincarnation. Joe Rogan, appears to be reincarnation friendly. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So here's the link to the Joe Rogan. Encourage people to watch that, and maybe you'll see an interesting trend. Just that that would be the show. So this is the new Proprietarian video, John Mark, and honestly, it's not that great of a video, but the map here was pretty interesting. So he thinks like this map is like his ideas, I guess, is like revolution and red and blue states. So this is just a simple map that has red and blue, but by two different factors. So population is by how high it's going out of the ground. I mean, how it's going out of the map. And the color represents how red or blue it is. So, the darkest blue is 25 to 50 points in favor of Clinton. The darkest red is 25 to 50 points for Trump. And how high it goes off the map is population. Does that make sense to you, Jennifer?
Yeah, I see it. It's very interesting. I guess all the Democratic votes are saturated in the cities.
Yeah, so I've mentioned this. It's basically obvious to anyone who knows demographics, and there's different elements. Like you could do it racial, group, income, but the population centers, the big cities. You got L.A., Chicago, New York, Florida, Texas, and almost all those are very blue, and the rest of America that has a sparser population is very red. And so whatever his conclusions were was interesting, but I was thinking this is close to what I was getting at with these predator prey. I like this chart if people want to watch the Proprietarian take on it. I'm not going to endorse that, but I watched the whole thing in 2-speed. It's kind of like a long ramble, but I thought the map was pretty cool, and I doubt they're the ones who made it. Like these type maps exist other places. I highly doubt the people at the Proprietarians are the ones who made this map.
No, you're right. It looks like a professionally made one. So what was he trying to say? Was it more arguments in favor of blowing up power stations, or something different now?
Well, he's kind of talking like balkanization and like Armageddon scenarios, basically. So the same talking points that they've been talking about for a while. But if you were imagining this in terms of flux and dynamic equilibrium, that there's certain equilibrium points that are stable, and after you have population shifts, those stabilities could be you could lose stability, but usually you find stability at certain levels. Like you could predict where you find stability. That's the utility of applying the predator-prey model to group conflict, is that you could predict stability. And I'm using a more mathematical, scientific language than the Proprietarians are. But if you listen to what Mark says in this video, it is quite a bit similar to what Doooovid is just kind of analyzing and using a method to better understand these issues in terms of applying predator-prey model mathematics to this.
So I guess you could say, in some sense, cities are net consumers of taxes and farmers are net payers of taxes, but could start to model it that way, perhaps.
Well, there's all types of different things you could read out of it, and so he has his own conclusions, and it's more like racial or ethnic or various things. And I think also I wanted to talk about John. If I ended up popping on John's stream, if he wants to come on, he's welcome. Also, I'll put the StreamYard's link in. But John was streaming, and he put me on with this Rabbi Reza. I think it might have been a Muslim convert, but he's a very popular streamer, and so I appreciate that. So did you see Luke was talking about that Amazon documentary that was on PBS. Did you watch that, or did you at least see Luke was talking about it?
Yeah, I think so. It was about a guy who, I kind of think I missed the gist of it, so it's sort of popping out. But it was some guy who ended up in some legal entanglement. Is that correct? The guy who really wanted to be a cop and ended up in hot water with the feds or something.
No, I was talking about the Frontline PBS special on Jeff Bezos and Amazon, the rise of Amazon.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, I remember that one. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's pretty popular. So, Bernie, yeah. So break the silence. Yeah, and any people who want to come on the stream and check out Week in Review and introduce yourself. That's also possible. So we have Claire here. So I'm adding Claire, but we'll finish off this concept of Amazon. Was that background noise from Claire already? So if you just mute a second till we finish up, Claire. So the technology for Amazon is pretty incredible, where they've basically digitalized all different sorts of information. We're talking like Amazon. Jeff Bezos wanted to be this hub for the sale of everything, not just books, but like eventually that like all types of sales, everything would go through, his center. And then you have artificial intelligence working on multiple different levels. But now Amazon, does the shipping. They have their own distribution centers and warehouses, and they have basically top level artificial intelligence, logistics, robotics that exist anywhere in the world. So if you saw the documentary, you saw a little bit of it, and it basically measures everything. It measures everything the employee does, how many seconds it takes them to move into the package. And I think it's the Herman Woot quote, designed by geniuses to be ran by idiots. And it's interesting, but I think the implications that we're talking about, where, let's say from a mathematically modeling of distribution, like Amazon Prime, they get you things in one day. I just got these pretty cool, these kale chips, and they were like $6 at my local store, and I found them on Amazon for package of $14 for 4, and I ordered and I got 1 day delivery. So it's pretty cool. Kale chips with like tahina mixed on it. But it was 1 day delivery. So, they have a distribution center. They were able to get it to me literally the next day. So thinking like to mathematically kind of solve logistics, how do you get from the resources to the product to the person that wants it? And, so if people watch, seeing that or familiar with that, it's pretty interesting thinking about that. And then theoretically, in the same way, I was thinking like John Mark, his little map there to apply that to the predator-prey model of group conflict would be to take this Amazon distribution and put it to what I talk about, the sum total equations of all of karma. So, the complications of how Amazon, and they're just solving logistics of shipping and products and getting one thing to another, let alone the universal unified equations that will give you the sum total of all karma total.
Wow, that's a tall order. Luckily, if we recurse through my teachings about quantum philosophy, we'll maybe not give a total answer to that question, but it'll put us on the right path of understanding at least the scope of complexity of the question. So thank you again, Doooovid, for bringing this to our attention.
We'll definitely be going back to that quite a bit. But now I guess, big news this week in these semi-small circles. Both people have been on my channel multiple times, and Week in Review many times. Jon Vance and Claire Khaw, and we have been tracing Jon for a while. Interesting politics and trajectory. Been trying different things, and this week he just announced that he is no longer affiliating with secular Quranism. So, I thought we'd turn the show over to that, and maybe we'll return to science and other things later.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I just had something to say about your just-in-time delivery system. It's actually pretty vulnerable to any catastrophe, such as like a virus outbreak or disruption in transportation. So it's not necessarily like stable system.
Well, that's probably true, but the point I was making was how Amazon is collecting all this information. They have voice recordings from Sirius. They have all this data on their employees and how they work with the robotics. They have all the data on us, and they use that data through artificial intelligence to increase logistics and more efficient things and shipping and getting people what they want at a faster pace. And obviously it's not foolproof or perfect, but I was applying that to what me and Jennifer, like the unified equations that will include the sum total, not just of the physical laws, but of the accumulation of karma. So I just think if you could extrapolate from what Amazon is doing to a much higher level, it might give you a feel for what me and Jennifer would talk about for our unified model that would have the sum total of all karma.
Okay. Yeah.
But
anyway,
yeah, I mean, let's jump straight to the drama. Or you say it's anticlimactic. It's just whatever. You're done. Secular chronism. That's it. There's nothing to talk about, argue.
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know. I don't really necessarily want it to turn into a drama fest, but I am done with secular chronism because it is hypocritical. It is trying to appeal to the mainstream, and I don't like some of its values of appealing to all of these individual groups.
What about mainstream Islam? I mean, have you abandoned secular chronism for mainstream Islam, or have you also abandoned any form of mainstream Islam?
I think I've just abandoned secular chronism. I haven't denounced any form of Islam per se, like mainstream, I guess. But just secular chronism, just based upon the interactions that I had with, I guess, mostly with Claire, but just in general, I don't see any. It's probably just a strategic, probably we're just breaking off when it comes to strategy and how to implement our rules, and we have totally different outlooks on how politics is conducted, so that's probably why we are breaking off. But another thing too is
question, Vance. Do you think it might have something to do with Claire's moral turpitude?
I think she's gone away from the path, and she's bound to hypocrisy. So I think her interpretations and her trying to one size fit all system has delved her into these moral quandaries. So in a way, I agree with Jen, I guess.
I'm not in a moral quandary. Your problem seems to be my alleged hypocrisy. So why don't you tell us what?
Well, I mean,
what kind of
it's
hypocrisy
just
I'm guilty of?
you're being sympathetic towards sodomy and
I'm not being sympathetic. I think you misunderstand the point of it. The actual prohibition against it is very simple. I've already said that if you're an unmarried parent, you get punished. Nothing short of that will kick in the punishment. So, in order to get 100 lashes, you would have to be an unmarried parent. You would have to have a bastard without a wedding certificate. So that's quite clear. And as for gay people, you're not thrown off a tall building in Islam if you're gay and you mince around and you have an accent like Vincent's. You actually have to be caught cottaging. There would be witnesses, there would be due process, and that was what I was conveying. And if you're a gay female, your lewd act with another woman has to be witnessed by 4 witnesses. So that's very clear in the Quran, and I'm doing it. I'm going by the book, and you're having a problem with that, it seems. I don't think that's really your problem. Your problem is, as you were saying earlier, one of strategy you want to not offend Christians. You want to not point out that their religion is kaput and idolatry, and I do. Isn't that what it's really about? It's not about.
I think you just go into just basically just purity spiraling when it comes to all Christians. I get the critique of Christianity, and it's a very good one, even from the Quran from itself. We don't need to go to secular Quranism to get this, but
I don't know what you mean.
yeah,
by
it's just some Christians are like actually welcoming of Islam for its polygamous and its pro-marriage stance.
I
And
don't
I
know
don't know
any.
why you're so against it.
Well,
Like, there's
I don't
obviously
know
like
which
Christianity is
Christian
not
you
going to
know.
go away. Like, are you like you just think like some rabbi is just going to magically declare Christianity is kaput, and then all Christians will stop practicing?
You think
It's
I'm
just
being
unrealistic.
Jew
It's
friendly.
kind of
That is your problem, isn't it? You think
What?
I'm being too Jew friendly. It's not really even about being LGBT friendly. And I'm not saying I'm going to pretend those rules are not there. I'm saying, this is how it is. It's actually in the Quran. If you go past these boundaries, are you going to get punished? But my strategy is simply to say to these people that they're not going to accept secular Quranism until they know that Christianity is kaput. And you don't want to say that because you're going to alienate your leader and these people that you want to support you. So that is really your problem. It's nothing so much to do with my LGBT friendliness. And of course, your leader is an anti-Semite. He's actually said he wants to kick them all out of Canada. And I guess you have to take his position because you have to stay in with him. And I've been saying to you, basically,
it's just like you're just purity spiraling again. This is Claire purity spiraling again.
Let's not relitigate
any like you have a conversation with a Christian, and if you don't mention that it's idolatry, you're somehow not you're not sticking to your principles. It's just
let's not relitigate this whole thing. I just wanted to get a feel.
I want to explain my position simply.
Yeah, I don't want to relitigate the whole secular Quranism thing. You could.
I'm explaining to you my strategy.
You could have a separate stream. I was just making a separate thing because you're like that's a matter for a separate stream, like your debate about.
I just want to quickly make a point which can be said in one sentence, which is to sum up the disagreement between John and I, which is that he wants to pander to the preference of the Christians and not offend them, and I'm saying the only way that they can accept any kind of alternative political ideology or religion is when they realize that Christianity.
Yeah, and then you're a hypocrite again. So you're pandering to LGBT, but yet we're not
pandering.
And then you're a purity spiral.
I see the logic. But, let's not relitigate this whole thing. So I think I get it. It makes basic sense. So John's complaint is one thing. Okay, Claire, she seems to still be going as hard as ever against Christianity. However, she's lightened up on homosexuality, at least according to John. And whatever the case, was John your only adherent to secular Quranism, or did you officially have anyone else? So did you go from having one follower now to zero?
I think about 4.
Yeah,
but, they weren't people who gave their real names. That's Alex Woodrow. But it's
a big loss. John was your biggest catch, and now it's a big loss because John was your biggest name, using his real name and adhering to your system. So losing John is big loss to you.
100%.
Not necessarily, because it highlights the fact that secular Quranism is not that LGBT unfriendly, and it would invite people to look at the actual wording of these sexual offences. And I do encourage people to actually read the Quran and not have silly blanket ideas about it, throwing people off buildings. And
I never said I was. You're putting words in my mouth now.
Well, I don't really want to relitigate
buildings
too much, so we keep it in terms of a week in review. So is there anything further to add? Where does this leave you to moving forward and saying, okay, will you still be friends and work together and talk? or there's nothing for you two to cooperate on, and so where did both of you go after the breakup?
Probably I'll just do some more IRL stuff and keep learning Arabic and practicing actual Islam instead of LARPing as a Muslim. So,
But do you continue these debates with Claire on various streams, or saying that's not worth anything?
It's just turned into like a kind of a Facebook thing, and I guess Claire's channel's been censored, and she's been kind of, I don't know, for whatever reason, hard on me since she's gotten censored for my party and my party's affiliation and how they do things, and seems like we've been across with strategy when it comes to that. So I don't know what Claire thinks. She hasn't even read the Torah, and yet she wants to fuse Islam with Judaism just because they don't worship any idols.
Well, I'm saying without your critiques of each other, like, so where did both of you move on forward? So I mean, okay, like, whatever, obviously you have your way of understanding Claire, and Claire is her way of understanding you, and your two understanding of each other doesn't match your own self-understanding, and whatever, that's what makes streaming fun. But with that, so what's in the near future in your streaming or pushing things forward?
You're asking me?
Well, I'm asking both of you. I guess.
Okay, well, we'll let John speak first, and then I can deal with whatever he says.
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep learning Arabic and reciting passages and going to mosque and praying and keeping up prayer and doing some other political activities. And I don't care what Claire says. Claire is from behind a computer screen. She's trying to dictate to people's lives.
What about you connecting it to your streaming? You're saying if your streaming is kind of narrowcasted to Claire and her audience, or saying that you're still posting YouTube, or you're going to try to
I've
move
actually
into
there's actually a lot of I'm getting a lot of Muslim audience now, so it seems like Claire scares away all the Muslims. Maybe
she's going to move forward
streaming interpretation of the
Quran.
I'd probably go for a more Muslim audience than maybe a secular audience, I guess you could say. Even though the Muslims are secular, it's just I'd probably just rather have Muslims than. I'm not going to discriminate against white. I mean, if there's some open-minded white nationalists out there that's willing to give dawah to its own people, I'm open to that as well.
Well, I haven't been following your channel. I mean, are you currently doing this, or have you been putting out content?
Yeah, I've been reciting Arabic prayers and having my comments on politics when it comes to Christians versus Muslims, and I guess according to Claire, I'm not saying Christianity is idolatry enough, but if you go to my stuff, it's obviously I have that critique, but I also say that there's Christians have a lot more in common with Muslims than I guess you could say the Judaic part. So that's kind of my stance on this.
And so you could say it's like a relative amicable separation from Claire, like you tried out her philosophy, it's not for you, and now you're moving on, or are you carrying beef?
I'm not kidding. I don't want to carry beef. It's just not really in my teaching. So I would say it's probably just a different. Just tried out the philosophy, just doesn't work out for me. So just move on to other things, and I haven't blocked Claire for anything. So I still talk to her every so now and then. But yeah, it's just nothing personal against Claire, even though politics tends to be personal. But yeah, it's just secular Quranism is just not for me, I guess.
Remember, I saw your thing. You said like you didn't come into streaming to make friends, and I've mentioned that. I've said that myself. You're saying you take a certain attitude, like I'm not here to make friends. I'm a serious man. I'm here to push forward my ideas, and that's more important than friendship in terms of if that's your dharma, if that's the purpose of what you're doing or trying to accomplish, and so that's your attitude towards streaming and activism. Like, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to get things done.
Yep. That's basically it. Yep.
Okay. And so did you want to hop off, or did you have anything else you want to add?
No, that's good. I'm good. So.
Okay. So thanks for coming on, and good luck if you start making some content or something interest. Pop me a line, and we'll talk again in the future. So maybe it'll be easier. I'll just move on to Claire, and I'll let you go.
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, assalamu alaikum.
I was going to say that maybe John should stay because I wanted to say something and he might wish to respond to that. But
I didn't want to relitigate secular chronism, so I mean that's why it's
no,
okay. We're more like
I
personal,
just
like what you guys
really
are doing.
want him to have the opportunity to respond if he feels he wants to respond to anything I've said. Now, I think that there were 3 points that he raised that I wanted to respond to, but I can only remember 2. But I'll start on the first one, which he accuses me of wanting to fuse Judaism with Islam or some Jewish legal system with Islamic law. It's not the case at all. He's totally misunderstood me. But I think he's basically looking for an excuse. One of the things he's done recently that has caused me some concern was the fact that he was he was pointedly refusing to disavow violence. So perhaps it was kind of him to part ways first, since he wouldn't give me the reassurance that I wanted. But there we are. He's said it was because I wouldn't be hard on LGBT people enough. And basically, I think his problem is that it's always one of principle, isn't it? You either think it's okay to be an idolater, or it doesn't matter, even though there's a rule against it, or you just carry on. And Christians have been carrying it on for 2,000 years, and because nothing too bad has happened to them, they're just going to carry on. And sadly, John is going to go this way because of his leader, who identifies with Christianity and doesn't want to alienate the potential support that he's going to get from Christians. And I think Christians are not really very effective people, because they don't really.
We don't know your philosophy. I don't want to relitigate your philosophy. I want to keep it more.
I'm just explaining to you what.
I mean, we've heard your philosophy plenty of times. We don't need to. It's want updates on, what's going on, what you're accomplishing, what you're streaming. So you're not streaming on your main channel anymore. How long is that lasting, or what do you want?
2 weeks, I think. It's 2 weeks.
Is that almost over, or 2 more weeks?
I think it's nearly over.
And
I can stream on my other channel, but lately my activity has been more on Facebook, and it's just more helpful to analyze words and ideas on using the medium of writing or typing, I should say, than streaming endlessly, which takes a lot of time. So yeah, more.
Well, I see you keep tagging me. Like, honestly, I was thinking like I don't know why you keep on tagging me. Like, I don't really participate in that, but I guess you're active and you keep on putting these mass posts out there. I did
want to ask you a question, though, Doooovid. I did want to ask you a question about the multiple truth hypothesis, and I've asked it quite a few times, and I kept hoping that you would answer it. And the question is it in theory possible for God to have revealed the Torah to the Jews and subsequently the Quran to the Muslims, to Gentiles?
Well, I would say yes. I mean, that's basically your Freemasonic or Avatar type interpretation, and saying, or Radhanath Swami, that God sends different messengers to different people at different times.
Mm-hmm.
But for Doooovidism or multiple truth hypothesis, that's in line, although it's not necessarily in line with so to say mainstream Judaism. I think if you're like secular Quranism, if Doooovidism is promoting let's say a certain sect or strand or neo version of Judaism, you think, okay, like why would I want to join your like little neo Hasidic Jewish cult? Like, let me first investigate mainstream Judaism, and that would make sense. It's like, okay, like why would I want to be a secular Quranist? if you haven't investigated mainstream Islam first. So I think I told you that when you had, that made sense that John would investigate mainstream Islam, and only after, like having a pretty good feel for mainstream Islam could he make a decision whether he really wants to be a secular Quranist.
Well,
And
they're not mutually exclusive, because
I'm
secular
not saying that, but I'm
Quranism
saying in terms
is
of
an interpretation
investigation.
of the Quran, and Islam is a proper religion. So if you want to become Muslim, fine. But I'm saying secular Quranism would accommodate the atheist to the polytheist. So that they're not mutually exclusive. But it seems that because John is a member of a party and has now joined his Muslim community, he probably feels uneasy about secular Quranism, which is probably too radical for most Muslims. They don't like talking about it because, well, frankly, quite a lot of them are cowards, or they think any new idea is to be immediately rejected if it's not entirely their way. It's their way or the highway. So a lot of Muslims, though they engage a little bit, won't come out in the open and talk about it. And I guess that may be, some of the influences that John is currently being subject to, because he wants to remain in his community and learn Arabic and that sort of thing, and, put political activism on the back burner because, for electoral reasons. Well, I believe that the political system is kaput, and to actually wait for some micro-cup party to make any difference is, well, pointless. So, my strategy is simply to plow on with a message and talk about secular Quranism rather than, self-censor, in case I'm offending people. My strategy would be to offend Christians in particular and remind them again and again that Christianity is kaput.
Okay, I mean, right, we've heard your philosophy many
doing is-
times. So, basically, you're saying you're just going to keep on continuing the same thing. So that's fine.
But my other thing is also to keep asking people what they think religion is for. Perhaps you have an answer to that?
Well, yeah, but I don't know if we want to discuss that right now on the week in review. Did you finish your thing with Vince and like asking rabbis about Noahide compliance? I think he's supposed to be on No More News on Tuesday, and I messaged him if he wants to come on
Tonight. I mean, now. Yeah, that would be good. He's now asking various Muslims whether secular Quranism is something they recognize. Of course, the response would be very predictable, and most of the responses are anonymous anyway, so I don't set much store by them. And the Muslim scholars I know would, of course, be too afraid to even be seen to be engaging with me, because they don't want to be identified as radical, so they won't be talking about stuff like that or be seen to be doing that publicly.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna move on to John. So is there anything you want to add, or is there anything before we move on that Jennifer or John wanted to ask Claire?
Yeah, how you doing, David? No, I don't have anything to ask. No.
Did you, Jennifer, have anything for Claire?
No, thanks.
Okay, so you have any final words, Claire? And then we move on to John, and just or if you want to, talk about your activities or what you're promoting, and then I guess we'll move on, keep it going. Might be a shorter week in review this week.
I'm just basically saying that the rabbi and the Muslim scholar thing is it's not really going to work Vince's way of asking various people, because they are of no authority, and my idea is basically to get Muslims to donate to large cash so that I can hold a rabbi-only essay writing competition about why Islam is no-hide, and therefore secular Quranism is also no-hide, and thus raise the status of Islam and secular Quranism over that of Christianity, which is guilty of supreme idolatry and is no longer fit for purpose. So that would be my strategy.
Okay, well, good luck with that.
One thing it'll prove for sure is that financial resources won't be spent on frivolous things in your government, right, Claire?
It's not frivolous to make this point, because the only way to make this point is to get these rabbis to agree, something that they already know is true. I mean, it is generally regarded. I mean, Muslims are generally regarded as no-hide. That's already said in rabbinic literature, but now they won't say it.
And whenever I think of people that don't already have enough money, I immediately think of rabbis.
Well, they're not rich people, Jen.
Well, there's a lot of them. I mean, you're just saying if you want to incentivize people to write something on it, like, yeah, I mean, money's probably the best way to do that. So if, whatever you want an essay writing type thing, and you would probably have a hard time convincing a bunch of rabbis, and the easiest way to do that would, probably be money. I mean, maybe not all rabbis would do it for money, but there would be a significant number of rabbis that probably would.
Yeah, I think that would work, and I think it should come from Muslims, because there's a certain neatness to it. And I've been talking about the Greater Israel project, because I mean the whole idea. I mean, I've been thinking about Greater Israel, and I think obviously if you're religious Jew, you would want Greater Israel, and it takes up a lot of territory from Lebanon, Iraq, Saudi, Turkey, and Syria, and of course it is a hugely ambitious thing, but to even think of doing it peacefully, Israel would have to be a theocracy, and the closest thing to a theocracy would be a Quran-based theocracy that will be easy on the Jewish
we know your philosophy
as well, rather than a full.
I don't want to relitigate. I don't really want to relitigate secular Quranism on Weekend Review.
No, this is new. Greater Israel is new, isn't it?
Well, I don't. Either way, I don't really want to relitigate it on Weekend. I just wanted to hear the progress in your streaming or developments. I don't want to really.
This is it. This is my theme. That's what I'm trying to explain. That my theme will be.
I got a question for Doooovid.
Okay, well, it might be easier just to move on, and we'll let Claire do something else, and we'll move on, because I don't want to keep on coming back to secular Quranism.
I was talking about Greater Israel, really, but all right. Well, thank you for having me on, and
okay. So hope everything goes well. We'll be in touch. Have a great night.
All righty.
Okay, John.
Shalom Aleichem.
Yeah, I got some of your emails. I guess you included me on the list, so I saw you were streaming a few times. And, like sometimes I wasn't even there, and I checked it. And, so it looks like you've been doing some streams, and thanks for putting me, and that you had, a Reza. I don't know if he's a rabbi or if he's like a Muslim convert, what his story is, but I've heard him a few times. And, so it was an honor to be on a stream together with him. I appreciate you, inviting me on.
Yeah, no problem. It wasn't like a harassment or anything. You were enjoying those emails to join the. I don't mean to spam you if that's what it came up.
A lot of times I'm busy, or I don't even see it till later, or if I did, like I popped on, and but yeah, I appreciate you. It's kind of like cool method, just like link. You're like, I'm streaming. Here's the link, and so however your streaming strategy is, like I appreciate that, and certainly. Do you stream with what's his name again? Reza.
Rabbi Meza.
And was he like a convert also?
Yeah, he grew up in South Florida, Miami, and he used to be an evangelical preacher, and he converted to Orthodox Judaism.
Okay, and he's a streamer. Have you talked with him a while? Have you streamed with him a few times, or is it just recently?
Well, I actually got him into streaming because I was doing the whole thing, and
years ago. I thought he was a pretty prominent streamer with like tens of thousands of views or even hundreds of thousands of views.
Well, he didn't do the whole streaming thing. He did the put out a video, sort of, once a week or whatever his routine was, like starting the Google Hangouts. Like, I got him into doing that. Like, and then that's kind of like what. Huh?
How'd you know him in the first place to recommend that he become a streamer? Instead
Oh,
of
I discovered him through YouTube. I found him on YouTube.
Wait, so you just started commenting on his videos, and then you convinced him to
definitely,
as opposed to just recording and uploading videos.
It's better that way, just having interaction with people and just discovering things on the fly is like a little more. I don't know. I find it a little more interesting. So
who's your pagan panelist there? Like, I wasn't sure kind of like what your stream's about, how you doing, if you had like topics and it's kind of like random. You had like your pagan panelist on the Jew stream.
I was trying new. I gotta be honest with you. I was trying something new. I just sent the link out to a bunch of people.
Just
everyone on my contacts.
You never, our old Babscast style, who doesn't even stream anymore, so people don't even know what Babscasts are anymore.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. What's that?
Babylonian Hebrew, who just have his open mic streams where he'd put the link in the chat, and then he'd be like absentee and be like, I'll be back in a few hours, so the streams would take crazy directions.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, definitely. I should try to do that. I would do that, but YouTube is too sensitive,
There are people that do stuff like that. What they do is they don't record the stream, and they seem to be able to get away with it. I don't know how far you want to let it go. I know Claire had one.
Delete the stream afterwards. I mean, usually, like, you have to do something really bad. You have to do something really bad to have the stream taken down as you're streaming. Like copyright strikes or like nudity or something like that. But just like words are unlikely to get the stream taken down during streaming, and if you just take it down afterwards, you don't risk anything to your channel.
And if you're really paranoid, there's a way to like not even record the stream at all, so there's like no record of it in the first place. But I mean, it does sort of come to a point where there needs to be some moderation on the channel. Like, I don't see myself getting to a point where I could just let it go with nothing and just trust people not to mess it up. But it is fun to sort of open the floor a little bit, and I find that can happen when you ask the right types of questions that get people like comfortable. So I do appreciate you sending out the invites. It's not a good time. I'm usually in bed and the stream is over each time, but if I can make it on at some point, I'll drop in. It's usually better for me if there's like a set topic.
You're like, John, you're streaming I don't know, like MO modus operandi or whatever. It seems a little unclear to me right now. Like, if you're just kind of like a streamer, you're talking and it's interesting. Sometimes you're promoting Judaism. Sometimes you're just talking to whoever's interesting. Or if you have kind of like a whole developed like strategy or goal or what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, the Saturday night chat, like the one I had last night, it is more focused towards Judaism. It's more of a study. But the Thursday night ones that I do are more open house, open panel, whatever the term is, open panel. And it's just like, people come in, pagan comes in, you came in, what is evil? What's a Rasha? What does that all mean? Like that, just on the fly, you can develop.
Where do you get these guys from? I mean, do people who contact you or people you familiar from other streams, or do you actually recruit people, or you're just completely random people who turn out?
Oh man, Vaughn is a nut, man. He goes all the way back with me to Stickcam days. I don't know if you know the website Stickcam. 10, 15 years ago, it was a popular site where you can dock up like this, StreamYard, and you can, talk to people and stuff. And he used to have a room called NWO UFO, and he would talk conspiracy theories. He's a flat earther. He believes in all sorts of different things, so he's an interesting character.
I saw that video.
That's how I knew him.
That guy Hughes died today, who was like a flat earther, and he was trying to somehow prove, and he, like had a rocket accident and died. I don't know if it's just random when you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big flat earther, to be honest with you. I mean, to be honest with you, I've been in a plane and I look at the plane window. I mean, it looks kind of flat to me, but what do I know? People
There's
say
just
it's
a video
round.
clip going around on different venues of this guy. I mean, God forbid, died. I'm pretty sure today or yesterday, and he was a flat earther, and somehow he was trying to prove that the Earth was flat, but like something happened to his rocket and he died. Hughes was his name. I'm not familiar with him. Just one second, we got JohnSeven. So you can John, die Duits Deutsch?
Shalom, Doovid.
Shalom, are you German or something? I'm not sure if you wanted to introduce yourself. I saw you commented on my video and wanted to come on and talk, so appreciate you coming on. I thought you said English isn't your first language.
Have you seen my video?
You're the one who had that quick video on the soul, like the 40-second and the 3 types of soul?
Yes.
Yeah, I did see that. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Sorry to interrupt you, John. I just wanted to get some new blood
No
in
problem.
there.
Go ahead.
So John's a fellow streamer, so our Church of Entropy, you might end up on their streams channels also. So did you want to give a quick introduction to we got 25 people watching your my channel, just like who you are, what you do, what your streaming is, and then maybe we could talk about what you wanted to talk about.
Okay, so thank you for giving me your platform, Doovid. So I am a spiritually powerful human being, not like average human beings, in the sense that I don't necessarily, I haven't necessarily studied the 3 Abrahamic religions, but I know the invisible world more than average human beings.
Well, do you want to give like a quick bio, just introduction, or saying you just want to? I mean, I guess you're making some claims, or you have some philosophy, and that's fine if you want to promote it. But I want to, did you want to give some sort of biographical information to the people watching?
Okay, but you have to know that I do this only in my free time. Okay.
Or saying you use an anonymous name. You're whatever, you have a day job and you're just a anonymous spiritual poster on YouTube.
Yes, it's not my job actually. It's just what I do in my free time, like religion and stuff. But in real life, I'm a scientist.
What kind of scientist?
Yeah.
Oh, what kind of science? Okay, Gandalf is here, so hopefully my computer. Can you hear me? I think my computer's frozen. Hopefully things are going.
I can hear you, Doovid. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was going to screen share and show the video that John made, but my computer appears to be frozen. So if you could, talk for a second, we'll see what's going on.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show, JohnSeven. What made you want to come on here today?
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to have your reactions about my video.
I was gonna screen share your video, and somehow I'm not sure, my computer's like not responding right now, so it's frozen. Although if you could still hear me, that's good. It's not that bad, but that's what froze my computer. I was just about to screen share your video, but if you want to put it in the chat or something like that, or just say it's only a 45-second video. I was going to add Gandalf, but for some reason my screen's just frozen.
Okay, so thank you. I've never seen your channel before, dear, but how long is the video?
It's 45 seconds.
Okay. I can grab that video. I'm not going to be able to play it, but I can look at it. So JohnSeven is the name of the channel. Okay.
So I'm not sure if I...
What about you, Doovid? What's your thoughts on what you have seen?
Well, it was pretty quick. It was just 45 seconds, and you didn't really. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Like, it wasn't enough for me to put together a philosophy. So I'm trying to figure out here, if I have to reset my window, if it's going to end the stream or if it's going to give me like a leeway to keep the stream going. Because unfortunately, something is not right here on my screen. I have to restart my browser window. So I guess I should just go for it, and hopefully the stream doesn't end.
Okay, Doooovid, I can try to stay in on the call and fill the air. I'll talk to people. I can check this video out. Unfortunately, can't put it up on the screen quite yet. But yeah, so have you seen much of our shows? Well, are you still there?
Yes, actually, I've discovered Doooovid like a week ago through No More News. I don't know if you know the channel No More News.
Yeah, Doovid's been on there a few times, so I'm familiar with that channel. Yeah, so you followed Adam Green's work?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. It looks like Doovid, it looks like the stream is all right. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I hear you. So okay, I'm glad I just had to reset, and I got to add Gandalf on. So I lost for like 30 seconds. So was John able to explain what he tries to explain in the video? I didn't understand. You said English isn't your first language. Did you say what your first language is?
I have actually two first languages. I speak French and Arabic.
Okay. So here you have. Can you see the screen share? I guess. I mean, you're talking about like a trinity of spirit, and you have peace, soul, path, body, happiness, spirit. Is that the three names? What's the one in the lower left-hand corner? Is it something body? It's not clear in your video. So you have happiness, spirit on the top, peace, soul on the bottom right, and the bottom left is like path, body.
It's the real Holy Trinity. It's patience, happiness, and
Patience. Okay, it's just not clear on the screen.
And so on, and so on.
Yeah, so it just wasn't enough information. But I'm saying, is it based on some sort of tradition or just your own spiritual, kind of research, or are you promoting some sort of tradition?
Okay, so if I tell you that it was a revelation,
It was a revelation to just
you're going to assume that I'm prophet, but I'm not. It was just something that I thought about. I discovered myself.
Okay, well, very interesting. I mean, I guess you maybe work on articulating it a little bit better, so you're able to explain exactly to other people. Or if you're saying if it's just the language difficulty, if you're French or Arabic, you'd have an easier time expressing it.
I'll try to explain it.
Si tu veux l'expliquer en français, moi je suis capable de comprendre et je pourrais traduire pour toi.
Je veux parler en français.
Et le reste ne comprendront pas, donc on ne le fera pas tout de suite. Mais si tu veux m'envoyer quelque chose en français, je pourrais bien le comprendre. C'est plus facile.
D'accord. But I try to explain in English, no problem.
Well, it's really great to meet you. It's always nice to find people who are interested in stuff from a spiritual perspective, isn't it, Doovid?
Yeah, I don't think too many people in our audience understand French, so you're going to have to do your best to speak in English, even if Jennifer could understand your French.
Okay, no problem. So,
but
Doovid,
if you try to be concise and just clear.
Okay, no problem. So, you believe in Moses, right?
Well, I do, but I'm saying there's different people or people watching may or may not. But I certainly do.
And if I had to ask you what is the main teaching of Moses?
Well, you're having some sort of technology issue. I'm not sure what your voice wasn't coming in clear there.
If I had to ask you what is the main teaching of Moses?
Well, it's unclear. I mean, Moses is the prophet. Moses says a bunch of things: choose life, fear God, look after the stranger, orphan, widow. But yeah, I'm not sure if you say. I mean, monotheism. I'm not sure if you say there's a main teaching of Moses, because obviously, there's a whole law book and a whole series of teachings.
Okay, so about you, Church of Entropy. I assume you're Christian, right?
No, I do natural religion. So you could look at it as like a scientific philosophy.
No one's Christian on this stream.
Okay. So so I will talk on behalf of Christians. So or I assume that you all know that Christians believe in the Holy Spirit.
We're all familiar with the basics of Christianity, but none of us are practicing believing Christians.
It comes up a lot because there's this question that always recurs about whether Christianity is idolatry. So it does get brought up, but people haven't really gone into what exactly the Holy Spirit means or other nuances like that, because a lot of the Christians, I guess that doesn't really come up too much. But if you want to tell us a particular argument, usually what we focus on in these shows is something we call meta-analysis. So it's like analyzing social trends, which can include religion, but don't always, and usually sort of cycle back to some type of a scientific foundational basis or a philosophical standpoint.
I didn't understand what you said, but okay.
She's just telling you what we do on this show and what we're about. Is this your first time on a stream, or do you want to talk about
Yes.
how you heard of me, how you came across my streams?
First, I just finish my explanation, and then okay. So we talked about Moses, and then we talked about Jesus. Now we're going to talk about Muhammad, peace be upon him. So the religion Islam. The main teaching of Islam is peace.
Yeah, so why don't you just concisely explain your philosophy? You don't need to ask any questions, or just give a quick, concise 30 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever, kind of overview of what you're trying to say.
Okay, so what I discovered is that the three religions of God, they complete each other, because human beings we have a body, a spirit, and a soul, and that's what the three religions teach. They teach us to take care of the body, the spirit, and the soul by giving us examples of like Moses, I consider him the holy body, and Jesus, he was the Holy Spirit, and Muhammad, the Holy Soul. And sometimes you can find people who follow two religions, like if they have one parent who is a Christian, for example, and their mother is Jewish, and they can follow the path, both the path of Jesus and Moses, for example. But human beings have never reached the spiritual level of following the paths of the three prophets at the same time. That is to take care of the body, the spirit, and the soul at the same time. And that's where I discovered last year, I think. And since then, I'm trying to apply it, because if I want to do it, I need to detach myself from material and live fun, and that I haven't done yet.
Is this your first time appearing on a stream?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I mean, so we're glad you're coming on the stream, and so you might have to look a little bit into your dynamics, your sound quality. I'm not sure what kind of like microphone you have, or if you actually want to buy a microphone or consider. Streaming is an extremely good way to communicate your idea and cooperate your ideas with other like-minded people. But there are some minor technological considerations like quality or expression of your ideas, and especially if you're trying to express your ideas in in a second or third language. You have people like Jon Vance Claire Khaw, who's a successful English streamer, as English is a second language. But there's dynamics. So and that's what we have this week in review for, is kind of go over our ideas, our advancing the stream, and also give a chance to introduce new people and new ideas.
Okay, thanks for the advice, but I just want to have your reactions, your first impressions about what I and the video.
Well, I mean, it seems interesting ideas. I'm not sure, like, if you're adding them, if you're just trying to unify, I talk about like multiple truth hypotheses. Some of my things are even just kind of straightforward Freemasonry. If you're just kind of unifying the main, Abrahamic religions, or the soul systems or something like that. I mean, so it's interesting. I'm not sure you're like, if you're telling us something ground shattering, or you're just kind of making a nice insight. And I'm not sure if it's like like a whole like philosophical system. So I'm not really sure what to do with what you said. I mean, it seemed like an interesting thought, but I don't know like what are its implications or any of this stuff. And whether you're saying these are just things that it didn't sound like you're saying something like earth-shattering or new. It sounded like you're saying things that people in the past have said. So if you're saying you're not saying it in a tradition, you feel that like you've had special insight to these ideas, or is it possible that like, no, I mean, you're saying something that many people in possibly schools of Freemasonry or different things have been saying for centuries?
As far as I know, there is no historical or religious book who talk about this, because I searched and I didn't.
I mean,
find,
the unification of Jesus, Muhammad, and Moses. I mean, saying like that's that, like you're not the first person to attempt to do that. I mean, your method of unifying Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, might be different. But I mean, certainly, that's why I say like within the Freemasonic school, or even what Claire was saying right before you came on, is it possible that the same God who prophesied to Moses is the same God that prophesies to Muhammad? Or is it possible that Judaism and Islam are simultaneously true, even though they have different implications? And that's why Doooovid has the multiple truth hypothesis. I'm not sure if you heard my talking about that. So just your concept of what I'm going to call a unification of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, or Muhammad, Moses, and Jesus, like doesn't seem to be unique or ground shattering. You just might have a different method of doing it.
There's a comment in the chat saying, I haven't heard anyone say Judaism analogous to the body, Christianity, the spirit, and Muhammad, the soul. So I think it's original. I don't know if it's deep. It needs to be explained a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I guess that's basically what I'm saying. So I'm kind of differentiate, what isn't unique, what very familiar with, and then so if you're just giving some different way of unifying these different things, what's the utility of it, what's the implication, and like why should people care, so to say? People are watching this and maybe thought about these ideas before in the past, like what's the utility to them of your ideas? Why should they care?
I think that this idea can change everything. Can change everything about what we know of religion, of God, religions of God.
Ce qu'on fait ici, d'habitude, c'est un petit peu comme une école. Fait que si tu veux t'abonner à mon canal, on fait des émissions de même à chaque semaine.
D'accord, ça
Alors,
t'intéresse?
ben sûrement, on est toujours intéressé à parler à du monde qui ont des idées, qui cherchent à développer peu à peu. C'est ça qu'on fait, comme on se parle, jase, puis on parle de ce qui se passe. Puis le contexte, c'est qu'on s'améliore en tant qu'intellectuel.
D'accord, merci beaucoup.
De rien, ça fait plaisir. À la prochaine.
John, I was just curious. Are you familiar with like French Sufis like Rene Guénon and do you study people like that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't.
Yeah, you're coming in a bit staticky. Have you ever studied like the French Sufis like Rene Guénon? Like he would be someone who would probably interest you quite a bit if you're along this track of thinking.
I have already studied a little bit of Sufism, but it was interesting, like the mysticism part of a religion. Yes.
Like, you know, I've had some recent arguments with Claire on my Normie book. She's upset that I actually am going to read the Quran, but I'm doing some background work because Arabic is, you know, not a language I'm have at all facility with. Like I have difficulty just picking up the script. Like I can pick up Hebrew script more easily, and I have several Hebrew dictionaries in my house and biblical dictionaries, but I don't have Arabic stuff. And so I ordered a book that I'm actually I have it in my queue. It's difficult to find a cheap enough copy, so I'm still hunting around for it by probably the finest Arabic scholar and Quranic scholar in America. He's still alive. He's almost 95. He taught at Queens College for a long time. His name is F.E.
You guys continue. I'll be back in like 2 to 5 minutes.
Sure. His name is F.E. Peters. And, you know, Claire wants me to read the Quran. And, you know, I want to give everyone a fair hearing. And I am going to read the Quran. But I'm doing my work to get, like, an understanding of the Arabic down and the major schools of interpretation of the Quran within Islamic thinking. Because I don't particularly think that you can do secular Quranism. Because the very nature of the religious community, from the point of view of classical Islamic political and religious theory, as well as the very nature of secularism, as Claire tries to understand it, I think from a hybrid Western Asian perspective, I don't think those two things can be combined at all in the kind of framework she thinks it can, and be fair to either secularism or, as she sees it, Quranism.
Gandalf, can I ask you a question?
Yes, you may.
Why do you want to study the Quran?
Well, I think the number one reason is I've had a long history with Claire, as have all the people in this panel. And, you know, I think I want to understand the ideas, but from my own perspective, because I do respect, even if I'm not a believer in a particular religion, I want to read its sacred text and try and understand it as close as possible as its believers do, to be really fair to the tradition. I mean, I consider myself, if you took a personality test of mine, in like the Big Five, I mean, the one of the Big Five traits I score highest on would be openness. The other trait I score moderately high on is neuroticism. So I'm pretty fanatical when I approach a text, and I approach especially sacred text or a text that's based on a sacred text. I try and approach it with a very hermeneutically sound and tradition-oriented mindset, to be fair to the text and to be fair to the people that follow the text.
Okay, so did you know that the Quran is written in a preserved tablet in the heavens?
I've heard that that interpretation. Correct? Yes, I have.
Okay.
I mean, from my perspective, I mean, I'm not like Doooovid is the exception here. I think Church of Entropy probably agrees with me, and many of our people agree. Like, I'm not an Abrahamist in any sense of the words. I'm I was having a pretty knockdown, drag out fight with a Christian today. He's a good guy. I think he's going to come my way, but I'm pretty sharply critical of Christianity in particular. In general, like the concept of revealed religions, I think when I was younger, it was strange to me, but Catholicism sort of covered up that strangeness for me just enough with its aesthetics and its liturgy. But in general, revealed religion is just something that is foreign to certain spiritual and intellectual predilections of mine, which is why it's always interesting hearing very intelligent, and from what I can tell, from what little I can tell from speaking with you, thoughtful interpretations of these religions and these spiritual standpoints.
I see. So you study religion, but you're not sure.
Well,
You're not. Sorry, you're not a fan of revealed religion, right?
Yeah, well, there are many good people who believe in revealed religions. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, and I think there's certain things in revealed religions which point to important truths. So, I take a nuanced approach to it, but in the end, I don't believe that God works in the way cosmically that the average adherent to a revealed religion believes God works.
Okay, so and what about other like ancient legend?
You're roboting a bit. Could you repeat that?
I said, what about other religions like ancient Greek religion?
I'm much more positive about ancient Greek religion. But it's not my religion. I mean, I don't have much other than a slight bit of German-anicized Italian. Most of my blood is from Northern and Western Europe.
But you think it's more logical than Abrahamic religions, right?
Yes.
So why are you studying this? Why don't you study polytheism in general?
Well, we're monotheists.
Yeah, we are monotheists. Like, I don't believe I believe in a supreme God. I'm not a polytheist. Like, or I don't understand polytheism in the way that I think classical Greeks did their polytheistic pantheon. But I tend to be interested in religion more generally, and all the long talks I've had with Claire about the Quran and just the various factions over there with the Jon Vance video have just encouraged me to take a much, much, much closer look at it. To be fully fair, I mean, I've known good Muslims my whole life. I mean, when I lived in Queens for a while, most of the places I would shop for my food, I didn't get my hair cut, even occasionally go to clubs, were in an Egyptian neighborhood or an Egyptian wing of a neighborhood there. And, for a long time, I've had a lot of friends from Libya. So I know a lot about that country and its particular cultural and spiritual disposition. And, and I've read, I've read like the classical medieval Arab philosophers, and I've got the complete collection of Rumi poetry and stuff like that. But I think, and I know a lot about like the political histories of many of the countries in the Arab world, particularly in a more modern period. But I think I need to give all because like that part of the world is still occupies a large part of the global consciousness. I think it's time to take a good deep dive into it, and it's going to be one of the things that I work on in March, especially if I get some F.E. Peters texts that if I can get them at a cheaper price than $800, but I'll figure out a way to get it. And I know how to hunt for books in odd places. But you know, all the arguments with Claire and these certain arguments between Abrahamists and non-Abrahamists, you know, I'm trying to get a deeper appreciation of certain subtleties there that I think often are missed.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I mean, John, I'm sorry I missed the last few minutes, but I mean, you know, like obviously, you know, me and Church of Entropy and the unification models, and you know, so there might be different ways to attempt unification. There could be you know, insights, even if it's not a complete you know, working theory that solves everything. Doesn't mean that it's not useful and carry certain insights with it. So you know, always interesting to find more people you're working on the same problems, or trying to give deeper insight into the same things. You know, that's what we're here for.
I agree.
So did you have, you know, Jennifer, Gandalf, can you kind of concise, you know, your understanding of what John's trying to say? Were you able to understand?
Well, he has
Sure.
a... Yeah, you go ahead, Church.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I totally get it, and I hope we can have more conflict like this. Honestly, I just it's not my area of special concern, but I'm glad just to see the subject being brought up for the meta-analysis of just getting the lesson or meta-lesson across, or whatever you want to call it, of the importance of certain type of thinking. And I like that these, you know, made diagrams and dividing stuff up and thinking in a systems-based, categorizing way. I'm excited just to see that that's the direction people are going on. I don't want to, you know, say what other types of people have come on the show in the past, but we all know, and the audience member's been calling us for a while. I'll remember. This is pretty good as far as just random drop-ins of people none of us know.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. I mean, I'm gonna after this show is concluded, I'm definitely gonna consume more of your video content, because I like anyone who's trying to, particularly if you use visual models in addition to speech and text, to try and communicate a deeper model of the universe. Inherently I respect that effort, because it's an effort few people make, but it's an effort more people of a certain kind need to make. By the way, John, if you don't mind me asking, because you have both a French and Arabic background, from what country are you from originally?
Where do you think I'm from?
My guess is either the Maghreb or the Sahel, but I could be totally wrong.
Yes.
Mali, maybe?
Did he get it? Did he get it?
Yes.
Oh my God, he got it! Oh my God! How did you know?
I'm a pretty cultured, cosmopolitan person.
Wow, that's awesome.
Well, I'm the rare type of guy that I can go onto Skype and call politicians in Enugu, Nigeria, and they'll pick up my phone call.
And had you heard of Gandalf or Church of Entropy before tonight, John?
No.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, guys.
Jennifer is probably, at least in terms of visual, she like, you're very close to what you're doing. Obviously, is a completely different approach and is more scientific. What's your thoughts on reincarnation, or did you talk about that while I was gone?
You want to have my thoughts on...
On reincarnation.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if it's you're going to have to work with this, but your sound quality sometimes goes out, and I mean it's worthless to the people watching if they can't understand what you're saying.
Can you hear me now?
We hear you, but there's a little bit of fuzz, and I'm not sure what type of microphone. If you're talking too close, or if it's reception, or whatever the issue. But you know, like sometimes your reception fades out and people just can't understand what you're saying.
Okay, so I'll give you my opinion, a short short version, and
Am I the only one
maybe
hearing
next
that
time we
noise?
can talk about.
No, I think it's a connection issue.
Yeah, there's some sort of like voice modification when you're speaking that's coming at the same time. It's almost impossible to hear what you're trying to say.
What might fix it is if you drop out of the call and then come right back in, and that's usually, I mean,
Well, that's for Google Hangouts. I'm not sure
Ah.
what type of setup, if you're using a phone or if you're using a microphone or if you're just talking into your computer mic or whatever. I mean, if you want to take a break to try to solve this tech issue, because I'm not sure if people just can't understand what you're saying.
You know what? I have another. I have a microphone, but I have to set it up. So maybe next time, okay?
Okay, yeah. I mean, next week we'll probably be on Jennifer's channel. Yeah, I mean, I like you'll listen back later. You'll see what you sound like. So whatever you could talk offline or message me, and I mean, if it was going to be quick, we could try to walk you through it online. But streaming is a good thing, but you got to resolve your tech issues. You got to make sure that you sound clear in your connection's good. So it's no problem. There's just a week in review. We introduce new people, but I would highly recommend streaming as a venue to get your ideas out there, and don't fall by the first stumbling block of just having minor tech issues hold you back from doing that.
Yeah, you seem to be an extremely interesting person, someone I would like to talk to more in the future. Last question: which country? Are you from Mali?
Well, I mean, we did want to hear your
Mauritania?
opinion on reincarnation. So why don't you just say what you think on reincarnation? And even though it sounds not so great, but we want to hear your opinion on reincarnation.
Okay, so my opinion is that it's a very hard question.
So I mean, no comment now, or I mean, is reincarnation such an important thing that doesn't fundamentally have to play into your philosophy? I mean, is it possible that according to your system, that Jesus is the reincarnation, and Muhammad, they're reincarnations of the same soul, or something like that? Is that or did you think about those dynamics?
So my opinion is that you can find like two people or more that look like each other, but
Just so you know,
the
you
soul
sound fine
is
now.
different.
Whatever you did, you sound fine now.
Okay, so you can. I said that you can find two or more people that look like each other, but the soul is different. That's my belief.
But I mean, what happens to the soul after death, and does it remigrate and take birth again?
The soul stays with the body.
You're saying, I mean, after death, you're saying the soul stays with the body till the decomposition of the flesh, or even after the decomposition of the flesh?
To be honest, I don't know.
Okay,
But,
I mean, you
but,
never thought about it. I mean, it's an important issue, and it's one of the one of the binding forces of the partnership for me and Church of Entropy is this research into the science of reincarnation. But if you didn't factor that into your philosophy, that's fine. But we were just curious because it's a major part of our show and what we talk about.
okay, but it's very interesting, and as I told you, it's a very hard question.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I was saying it would have implications on your theory, presumably. I mean, if you came out and said your theory necessitates that reincarnation doesn't exist for whatever reason, or if you're saying the opposite, that reincarnation is an integral part of your theory. So, I mean, like, I don't understand your theory well enough to say, but like, I mean, I could conceive, either way, or you could have, saying it's just not a main part of your theory, and you could add reincarnation to it. It's not going to affect, but assuming anything you're talking about the soul or the nature of the soul or the divisions of the soul, it just seems a logical question. Like, well, how does that go together with reincarnation? You have anything on that, Jennifer?
Oh, I was just thinking about the distinctions and the approaches and how reincarnation is it sort of divides the conversation up, like if you're willing to talk about it or not. And I was kind of trying to get the point across about how this ultimately hinges on whether the mind is a quantum computer, because there's stuff in quantum mechanics that...
Well, that's another issue that we could have asked you. The mind's a quantum computer, if you had thoughts on that. But those are two things that we talk about often. And if you never thought about it, like, we could probably tie it into your theory, or speculate on how those things would implicate your theory. So that's one of the things that would likely be type thing that we would discuss here.
Okay, I'll think about it, but you have to know that it will take me years to answer you, because as I told you, it's a very hard question.
Okay, yeah, we can move
years.
on. Just saying that, like, people who watch our show regularly, that's they want to hear, your thoughts on those issues. If you don't have any thoughts, I mean, you could think about it and come back next week or in a few weeks, and have a deeper answer to those questions.
Could I leave you with a couple questions that interest me? Because I was in the library today, and besides some classical Greek and Vedantic philosophy, I had 2 more books on my list that I need to get for a bunch of stuff. I've been investigating some certain things going on in African politics for some other connections I have. Are you familiar? If you don't mind my asking, what country in the Maghreb are you from originally?
Can I ask you too? Why do you want to know specifically where I'm from?
Oh, my question. I'm just terribly interested in a lot of these out of the way countries and like their obscure histories and internal.
Yeah, I mean, we're just conversationalists. I'm saying if you don't want to disclose your identity, we could move on and just skip the point of questioning. But I mean, it's just conversation. We're talking. The most natural thing to ask people is like who you are, what do you do, where are you from. And you say you don't want to answer those, you don't want to talk about that's fine.
Well, that's fine. No pressure.
Presumably, those are the most natural questions to ask somebody. What's your name, what's your daddy, where you're from, what do you do?
We can talk about it next time, okay? Because I just want you to have your thoughts on the video that I showed you. But thanks a lot for giving me a platform.
Thank you very much. And, my kind of conversations this afternoon were like, what's going on with the military in Togo? So maybe that's why I ask such weird questions.
To be honest, Gandalf, I don't follow politics, but we can talk offline if you want. We can talk later if you want, off stream, and I'll tell you where I'm from.
Awesome.
Okay, yeah, great. And I appreciate you popping on the stream, and we could talk about these issues also. I mean, you could talk about offline. We talk about them online, but I mean, just obviously, if you're new to streaming, you have to, consider, and if you're in a country that the laws may not be the same, like, okay, I'm in the U.S. and Gandalf is in the U.S. and Jennifer's in Canada, but we stream with people all across the world, and so you got to put your thought into it. Like, if you do become a streamer and start expressing these ideas online, if you're going to do that under, your real identity, if you're going to show your face, or the different cost benefits of doing it, and, various things. So, obviously, if you just popped on the stream to share your ideas and you're not ready to, you didn't think about these things yet, that's fine. Because, obviously, I encourage people to stream, and I've trained, at this point, quite a few people into streaming, and, would be happy to help you spread your ideas and work and develop your ideas. And, so you'll have to think about these issues for yourself, and then you'll have to think about how, how you're going to explain that to the people you're talking to.
Okay, I'll think about it, Doovid, but but the thing is, to be honest, I'm just afraid because because of what happened to the past prophets. I'm not saying that I'm a prophet, but I'm just afraid, because I know the
It's like,
invisible world a lot.
well, I'm saying, like, from some, just contradiction, like if you're close to a prophet, what are you afraid of? Saying like, okay, like, like prophets, don't fear death or accept karma or your mission from God, or either have enough trust in God that there's some divine mission that's going to protect them against the hearts and mind of other creation.
Because it's very complicated. But
Well,
yeah.
I mean, that's what we that's what we stream about, to try to, and we even try to put these into mathematical models to try, to not only like your concept and your model, but if we could even quantize that and apply formulas to it, that would be even better.
Okay, I'll think about it. But the thing is, if we talk like in real life, it's very different than on the internet. If we talk in real life, I think I can convince a lot of people.
When you're saying in an academic setting, you're saying even in an academic scientific setting, or you're talking like on a street corner in a place of worship or in town hall?
No, just average people.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we aim here generally to try to keep it to a scientific standard. And I'm saying, like, you could be right, and but Ches, if you could try to formulate your thoughts as best possible, that could also stand up to a rigorous scientific scrutiny.
Okay, I'll try to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do. That's why we're Church of Entropy. Because the laws of science. It's important that your teachings correspond to the laws of science and how the material world operates.
Okay, so thanks a lot for giving me the time.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Okay, take care. Be in touch. Okay, well, I got Ryan and KyleEight, so 2 new people. Ryan, who was on last week, and I'm sorry, I was tired last week. So you were saying interesting things, but I was just falling asleep. I couldn't follow. So KyleEight, is this your first time on the stream?
Yes, this is my first time. Thank you for having me, Doovid. Big time, long time. Hello, Church of Entropy. I wanted to know if I could show, I also have a triangle of wisdom. If I could show it, is that okay?
Oh my God, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is wonderful. This is like some sort of gift from God, 2 in one day.
You two know each other?
No, it's just the most insane coincidence.
Well, you want to do a screen share? Is that, I guess, okay.
No, I love it that 2
So,
people.
if you see here, I have my triangle, and it's the majority of the triangle is Jews run shit, and then you have Chinese labor on the bottom left, and then Arabs and other browns, and the smallest part is for Christians. But with patience and happiness and peace, Jews will have the entire triangle very soon.
Okay, I mean, like, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I wasn't able to. I shared that for a second, but I didn't want to risk having issues with my channel. So
I know. I figured you might try to take it down, but hopefully people saw it for a little bit.
well, yeah, I mean, you could refer them to your media or wherever you do that. I just don't want to have any issues with YouTube policy. But
I understand. You do not want to re-litigate. It is okay. I will buy the kale chips. They look delicious. I wish to try them also.
yeah, they're quite good.
One day delivery is the best.
Nothing is better than a box of Pop-Tarts from Costco, though.
Well, I was saying get Amazon Prime delivery. That, I mean, something like Pop-Tarts or something that I mean, that's a Prime thing that you don't need to go to Costco for. You could just Amazon Prime it.
I also like to eat with my fingers the way you do, Doooovid.
Yeah, well, I mean, I use utensils depending, but you know, like so.
Well, I'm an
Kyle,
absolute
did you-
barbarian when I eat with my hands.
Ryan, I saw your, you know, I'm glad you came on last week. I guess, you know, you're a prime target audience. You said you're pre-med science student. You know, you got your own thoughts on, you know, what they're teaching you, you know, kind of canonized university science versus, you know, maybe your own intuitions or some of the other, you know, things. Or I don't know if you gave your opinions last week on, you know, kind of like your worldview or spiritual take or your thoughts on important issues like, you know, reincarnation or quantum mind.
Yeah, thanks again. A lot of these thoughts that you guys discussed, obviously still developing, being very young. I'm only 20 years old, so sorry. So only, you know, had a little bit of time to consciously work through these. But from the perspective of reincarnation, I have kind of been exposed to it to some degree or another, and I do think that it's something worth exploring at the very least. But there's, you know, other philosophies it can fit into, and I don't think it can work standalone, obviously. But I don't know. Maybe you have a kind of path you want to set for the conversation, or something else to that effect.
Yeah, I remember I was your age. Like, I mean, I didn't even know what the hard problem of consciousness was, but yeah, I developed a deep interest in my early 20s to just understand, like, you know, how we produce consciousness, and you know, bought a bunch of books on it, and I tried to self-teach myself science on, like, you know, vision, trying to study, like, you know, the biology of how the eye turns into, you know, some sort of vision, and then eventually ended up going back to university, pre-med, and, you know, just constantly studying this. And you know, it's not like seeking a profession and one day you're going to be a doctor. You're not going to, you know, doctors don't get you know, paid, or that's not their dharma to sit around and think about these deep issues. You have a dharma to heal patients. And but if you really are interested in these questions and you're a student, you know, you see that there's a lot of precursor knowledge, which is mostly science. And, you know, so if you naturally are, you know, that's why most of the experts on these issues are scientists. So, you know, there's definitely that connection. So, you know, makes it's interesting, and you could direct your studies a little bit, you know, saying you want to accomplish your goal of, like, you know, getting into medical school, or, you know, accomplishing your material success. But at the same time, you could direct your studies a little bit in, you know, things that may benefit your ability to, you know, understand these issues better in, you know, some of your electives or courses that you take, you know, like maybe taking neuropsychology, or you know, different things. I don't even know what the course. I have to think about what your, or, you know, maybe if you went into like MRIs or something, you know, different fields that might be more related. I mean, radiologist.
So right now, I kind of have a primary emphasis in what I study, kind of in the bioinformatics realm, like computer science intersecting with like the harder sciences. But interestingly, I know you kind of briefly mentioned like the medical track I'm on, and I'm kind of lucky in the sense that I'm going to be going to an osteopathic school as opposed to an allopathic school. And one of the problems between those two kind of schools of thought or schools of medicine is that the osteopathic one focuses on mind, body, and spirit. So that's kind of not really something you see every day from your average doctor, I guess. But I do think it's interesting that they emphasize that to whatever degree they can, while still kind of maintaining reputation and like the scientific credentials.
Well, have you studied Hinduism, or do you have Hindu
No.
leanings?
I mean, I read a little bit for some of my school classes on some of like the really, really basic parts of philosophy, like abandoning the self and that kind of stuff. But that was just scratching the surface.
Yeah, but there's really nothing deeper than the Hindu theology and those subjects. Although, the Hindu religion is mixed together with a whole bunch of different things. I mean, Hinduism itself is a misnomer, and sometimes it's hard to just get, separate and get straight to the deep theology and the workings of the soul and separate that from, the larger religious practices. But you'll probably find that, there's a lot of answers in those texts.
Do you think that Hinduism is kind of incompatible with Western thought in that sense, like the materialism versus the abandonment of self, as I understand it?
No, I think ironically the Hinduism is the most compatible.
Well, it's the most similar to Judaism out of the Abrahamic religions, arguably.
Well, I mean, compatible with the modern meshing of spirituality and science. That Hinduism is the most compatible, more so than Judaism, Islam, Christianity, or Buddhism. That Hinduism lends the best to the combining of the modern science and spirituality. Especially in the explanations of consciousness or spiritual realms. I mean, it's, I think the deepest explanations. And if you don't have a background to even know the text or think about it, or to know to look for models or explanations. But I mean, you can keep this in mind in the future. Just as you develop your own thoughts or learn more. And just say what are the important questions that you're asking, or that the great minds have asked, that these religions or strategies have came to answer.
I'll keep that in mind. It's definitely something I should look into, given my interests. It's just something that I haven't spent much time looking at yet.
I don't suggest looking into it. You might just end up confusing yourself, because basically anybody can say anything, right? And there may be some fundamental misunderstanding that is just really essentially impossible to make certain links, because data is subjectively oriented, whereas the science, what we understand is science is objectively oriented. Not necessarily going to be much overlap, except for like very basic mechanics, right? Because they're derived from different directions, we can't expect to stitch them together. But it is possible to see how one begat the other. Problem is not just the information, but contextualizing the information, which requires a different way of thinking than what most people are used to. So there is something there to understand, but it's a big question of where do you start, right? If you're actually interested in going forward.
Are you there? Did you lose? Did we lose you there, Jennifer?
Sorry, I've been talking. Did you guys not hear me?
You cut out for like 10 seconds, I think.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was done talking. I just muted again, in case someone else wants to talk. I don't like to monopolize the convo,
Yeah, no problem.
Well, I wanted to piggyback on that real quick. There's a lot of, as Christianity started dying, kind of in Middle Europe, it started dying a lot after the national unifications, particularly of Germany and the Bismarckian era and the Culture Kampf and stuff like that. You had, particularly in that part of Europe, not so much further west, where people were a little more interested in either Islam or a romantic Orientalism. You had, like, within Germany, you had like a whole schools of thought where people were interested in Hinduism and Buddhism to a very deep degree. I mean, you see a lot of that, like Hermann Hesse novels, or in a much subtler way in like the works of, say, Thomas Mann, although Thomas Mann was much more Western and Abrahamic oriented for a whole bunch of reasons. So there's this trend within, like, because Germans are extremely idealistic people. Has been a trend toward looking to the Hindu East. I mean, the most important public philosopher in Europe right now is a German. He doesn't speak or write in English. He only does French and Dutch in addition to German. Is Peter Sloterdijk, and he was a child of the 60s, a leftist and a kind of a countercultural hippie growing up. And he spent a lot of the 60s kind of traipsing around India, kind of exploring stuff. and he writes about it in several essays that are compiled in a book called Neither Sun Nor Death, of which only a few of those essays are translated into English. So unfortunately, I've never read them all. So there is a tendency of certain kinds of scientific and philosophically minded idealist Europeans to look to the Vedas and the East.
Yeah, and a lot of what became European Enlightenment were really, ideas that exist in India, hundreds of years before that. Even like Spinoza and Leibniz and many of these things. But you'll discover that as you learn more. So you learn the ideas and you learn the origins of ideas. I forget. I was watching a debate, I think it was actually the Jay Dyer. Stephen Molyneux that we were watching, and they kept on talking like the history of ideas, and saying like I think if it was Molyneux, it kept on saying we don't have to keep on going over the history of ideas, and then Dyer's like, don't you have a PhD in it? And kept on saying everything you're talking about, you need to you really know the history of the idea to really understand it at a deeper level, and so you'll come across that in your studies. Then the more you know different ideas, and then the more you know about the history, and then putting that together for some sort of like unification theory, and then to understand why unification is extremely difficult. All the various well documented, we'll say, scientific things that contradict each other, that make unification very difficult.
So I know you guys considered like a bunch of different philosophies and worldviews and kind of attempts to approach a lot of these problems. Have you thought seriously about the theories about, wow, I'm blanking here. What do you call it? The simulation hypothesis at all?
Yeah, I've got a blog post on that. It's impossible because the simulator would have to be more complex than the universe, and there's a way to prove that the universe is all there is.
I tend to agree with that interpretation, because the simulation hypothesis, which is really just, in some respects, an attempted improvement upon like the holographic universe model that was really popular 25 years ago. It has some logical contradictions at the liminal edges that it can't solve within its own axiomatic framework, which to my view is problematic. Like, if you want a unified theory that gives you the most explanatory power for the most natural phenomenon and apparently supernatural phenomenon available at hand, ready at hand, to be like Heideggerian about it, you want a model which has axioms that you can build lots of logical deductive, inductive, and abductive lattices on, for which you can make the most predictions about phenomenon that occur in the universe that obey the law of cause and effect. I mean, this is an argument I've had with Claire for a while. It's like, if you posit a supreme creator God and you use the kind of arguments that St. Thomas Aquinas and a few other classical Arabic philosophers used about like the first cause and whatnot, you have if there's a first cause that's beyond all other causes, you have an exception to the law of cause and effect. But in the scientific worldview, the law of cause and effect, can't be abrogated at all. Otherwise, you have an exception to science, and then science can't ultimately be the root of knowledge. And all true knowledge, has to be scientific in a sense. If we're going to have I guess the kind of societies we want to maximize human potential.
That's interesting. I haven't been exposed to Claire before today, where they were kind of hashing out a little bit of the disagreement earlier. So maybe I'm missing a little bit there. But it sounds like
Claire, a very long history. Like, when I first met her was just before Christmas of 2018, and then she's like, "Yeah, let's stream together," and it started out okay, but then it sort of turned into like not very good, and yeah. Claire's some problems with boundaries, so she's very, very, very pro her own legal system. So she tries to always direct the combo to that, and yeah, it becomes somewhat tedious at times. So yeah, Claire's a character in the
Yeah, I was going to add that non-existence simulation or holographic is one of the at least impetuses that led me to come onto the multiple truth hypothesis. That what is truth? What's the true nature of reality? And then looking at maybe there is in essence like no reality, that there is in fact the physical realm doesn't actually exist, and saying how could you know that what's the nature of reality, and in essence know that the physical world is in fact reality, and so the leaving that open, that it's a possibility. The multiple truth hypothesis would say that maybe you have various possibilities that have various percentage chances or utility function or whatever like that, and that would include the possibility of non-existence of the material realm, maybe the different forms holographic in something. But that's an important precursor for the multiple truth hypothesis, at least to have thought about that issue, or to understand the scientific difficulty of proving or disproving non-existence.
When I brought up on your Discord a while back, like my interest in artificial intelligence and whatnot, you kind of said that you had a talk with JF about the multiple truth hypothesis, and that you wanted to release that eventually or at some point. But I'm not really super familiar with
No, I have my own
the theory that you lay out.
I was going to put forward. I don't think that had anything to do with JF. And I don't have I was just going to go over some of the preliminary precursors or the current state of research. Like if you were to produce a scientific paper, a lot of times in the introduction you have to go over a survey of the current state of research and other people in history that have said things similar to your idea, and how you're pushing things forward or developing something new. So I was just going to stream and talk about it and ramble. Maybe eventually I'll put it together in a book, and then it's like the question of how do I actually have some sort of unified theory that could include mathematical equations that could make predictions, and like I'm not anywhere near there, so they're just kind of a bunch of loose ideas of my attempts in my head to unify things, and my epiphany that in fact there probably are multiple truths that are currently at play that led me to think about things in a different way than most people conventionally think about, because presumably most people just think there's one truth that they're going to try to get to, as opposed to examining the nature of truth, or even considering the possibility that there might be multiple simultaneous truths.
So for there to be like multiple simultaneous truths, could these truths also have contradictions between themselves, or would they have to be, I guess, work with one another?
Well, yeah, I mean that's the problem, is that they do appear to have contradictions with each other. I mean, they don't all have to have contradictions with each other. I mean, obviously there's multiple simultaneous truths. Like if I'm Doooovid and you're Ryan, those don't necessarily have to be a contradiction. They could be simultaneous truths. But if you're saying okay, like whatever form of truths take that contradict each other, and there's all sorts of examples within hard science, even within hard physics. There's multiple examples of contradictions, or even just things like the unification of the forces, a strong and weak force versus electromagnetism, or relativistic Newtonian mechanics and Einsteinian mechanics, and certain things where we have a science and it works within that field. But in putting it together in some sort of grand unified theory, there's things that they do contradict with. So that's not just a phenomenon of philosophy; that's actually something quite frequent in all the sciences.
So maybe JohnSeven should check out the work you do on the multiple truth hypothesis and see if that can help unify those three religions together. I think it's an interesting task.
I'm interested to
Fair.
speak with him and hear his ideas, but I mean, if he's not a scientist, he's probably not going to last long in the week in review. So if he doesn't have a scientific
Fair enough.
approach, you know, he's probably going to have a different audience. I mean, he might have success or come on and talk about the development of his ideas, but if he doesn't take a scientific approach to it, it's going to be hard. You know, at least for me or probably, you know, the week in review affiliated people to communicate with them.
You know, I was just thinking, like, as this conversation developed, and about 4 or 5 minutes ago, I put in both the StreamYards chat and in the YouTube chat, I put a link to a book that I think I mentioned last week. I read it maybe 11 or 12 years ago, but I think if I had fresh eyes and reread it again, I would probably gain a lot more from it, because I've dealt with quite a bit more of these issues from a more mature mindset. But I think for Multiple Truth Hypothesis, and I think eventually we should do some streams where we actually read this book together. It's a foundational text of hermeneutics and in the social sciences, as they went from a more systematic and analytical realm.
Yeah, I don't own this book, but I was looking at this because Wersheimer. I've seen this book before, but no, I haven't read it.
I recommend getting it, and we should read it together. It's a foundational text, and it addresses a lot of issues you care about.
Yeah, I mean, the research is endless. Obviously, you know, you could only do your best to be on the, you know, so I talk about the current state of karma, and, you know, if you had unified equations that could, you know, give you like a vector field or field model for the whole current state, the sum totality of all karma, or, you know, even physical forces. So like, obviously, field equations that include the spiritual and the material realms together are going to be much more complicated than just the equations of the material realm. But you know, to at least try to think in terms of those lines and say, okay, the answer to our questions like require that information, and if the current state of science doesn't give us that information, at least we have an honest assessment about you know, the gap and the distance between our current level of understanding and the ability to answer these important questions with our current level of understanding. And you know, to keep on researching, you know, like the preliminaries, you know, to up your game, to review your sciences, review your terminology. It's important. But yeah, I mean, at some point you got to push forward. You're saying like, yeah, there's countless books. You know, you could fill up libraries and libraries, and you could recommend books all day. It's saying, but like, you know, at some point you got to move on. You know, I mean, you always got to continue your research. But it's saying like, you know, just noticing like, have you read this book? Have you read this book? It's always endless.
Claire just said she was her own. She was her only devotee, and she's an idolater for that reason. So I just wanted to call attention to that.
You know, I've invited Claire to become my star student. You know, she.
Yeah, I think you keep realistic on. You know, I think when I was on Luke, I was mentioning, you know, kind of the magical trust in science versus like the magical trust in religion, where you could pick up your iPhone and, you know, like it works, or like, you know, we're talking to our screen right now and we believe like it's a phenomenon. It works. So like, you know, we're in different places around the country and the world and we're talking to each other through this technology. But if you weren't a scientist and you're just like, it's just magic, you know, you just pop on the box and hit a button and you could talk to people across the country. And, you know, saying if you were a skeptic, he's saying like, no, I don't believe you. I think you're just some crazy person talking to a box. I don't believe you that there's anything on the other side. Or, you know, I was giving that example like Luke and prayer and connecting in terms of to the spiritual realm. You know, if you just look like, no, like, like, I don't believe you, Ryan. You're just some crazy man talking into your box. There's no one on the other side. And you're like, well, yes, there is. Like, no, there's a, you know, reality. And, you know, this is how the technology works, and it's easy, and you could do it too. Or even people who can't understand the technology, like the Amazon, and you say, I have no idea how this works. It could be magic for all I know, but it works. And someone was able to, teach me how to do it. So, it's just interesting, but thinking about what you could gain from these streams and the metrics, and it's like, okay, like I turn on, I'm talking to these people, and it's what's your connection level to what you're like. I was telling the John, saying like he's got to create a streaming personality, and Gandalf's just asking basic questions like, who are you, where are you from, what do you do? And so the person's like, I can't answer those questions. You say, well, what's your e-personality? Your e-personality is someone, for whatever reason, can't give your actual identity or so much information about yourself, but thinks a lot about these topics and wants to more something, or some sort of consistent story, or some sort of egotistical. It's just like, okay, I'm not just like a person with these ideas that I like to talk about, like I'm like almost a prophet or something. Or I mean, you could have that, like like I'm a Bahamsi, like like I am God. People have that.
It's a great idea. Just go up to people you never met, tell them you're God. It can't fail.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and or just the technology, like saying like if there was a venue, like if me and Jennifer were just doing like free, we were joking offline, like free calculus tutoring service, and we just like Sunday night, log in and ask your calculus questions that you can't solve for Monday morning to hand in, and like me and Jennifer will help you out with your calculus assignments.
To wit, okay, because it's just interesting that we mentioned like assignments in school, and I'm curious, especially because you've decided not to take an allopathic path in medicine. What do you think about, because Oswald Spengler mentioned it in the chat, he's one of the mods and a pretty regular listener to our show. What do you think about, or what do you know about scientism? Because there was a poll taken in the chat where, Josh, I think, asked, press 1 if you just trust mainstream science the way it is now, and like 5 people, including myself, pressed 1. I'm a huge critic of the scientific establishment because I think they are enthralled to scientism. How do you understand scientism, and what is going on with the worship of the scientific establishment as an idol, perhaps, as opposed to improving science as practice itself?
I mean, as I understand it, there's kind of a couple different ways to look at that phrase, and I don't know exactly which one you're most interested in, but there's obviously this disconnect where if you ask somebody in the hard sciences about religion, they're just going to laugh you off and be like, no, evolution, bro. But like at the same time, one of my best science professors is a devout Sikh, and so there's always exemptions to every rule, and I know that's not exactly the crux of science, but then you also have a disconnect between the, I guess, hard sciences and soft sciences or non-sciences, and that's always very interesting because they kind of get the same amount of credence or respect by the mainstream as the ones that kind of are more rigorous, to put it lightly. But yeah, I mean that's kind of the way that I see it. There's a few different angles you can look at it through.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's not just a question of science versus religion. I mean, it's interesting you bring up evolution because that's been probably for a century, since I think the Scopes trial in the early 1920s. There's been like this, at least in America, this conflict between low church Christianity, not so much like the Catholic Church and the higher Protestant churches, but low church Christianity, and the idea that there's a biological evolutionary basis to human development. That's been a core conflict. But I think it goes much deeper because there's a nature of scientific authority itself. I mean, the scientific authority that the West has claimed ever since probably, I'm guessing Bacon and Descartes in particular, the scientific authority of the West is based on something that Terence McKenna talked about quite a bit, the famous dream that Descartes had while he was a traveling mercenary. I think he was traveling through Ulm in central Germany, which is also a town that Einstein once lived in, where an angel told the sleeping mercenary Descartes, man will conquer the world by number and measure. And look at all the toys the West made because of mathematics that Descartes invented, and the scientific method as the occultist, because he was an occultist, Francis Bacon created and Newton improved upon. So like the toys the West made and the legacy of toy making is how the scientific establishment in the West has buttressed its authority. The condition it's moving into now, I mean, there's people like Hugo Bardi have commented upon it, so is Dmitry Orlov. Hugo Bardi and Orlov are both limits to growth Malthusians and system scientists by training. Orlov's also an engineer, he's Russian. They talk about a lot in the last decade, and it's become really noticeable since the financial crisis, that, you know, we've kind of hit peak innovation. So the toy making abilities of Western science might have hit, you know, peak, and now they're delivering diminishing returns. There's the famous quote either by Thiel or Weinstein at some event like a year or two ago, saying we were promised, you know, flying cars on the show The Jetsons, right? But all we got was 140 characters on Twitter. So there is something to the fact that the toy making ability of Western science under the paradigms by which Western science has buttressed its authority for the last 400 to 500 years, that toy making ability is now hitting diminishing returns. So what do we make of a scientific establishment that can't self-actualize itself according to its own internal mythos anymore?
It just makes me think of the ConOps every time. I don't know if you've seen ConOps yet, Ryan, but he's like, I think he was actually on last time. Yeah, he was. And it's always, you know, we don't believe in evolution. It's like, it so often reduces to this evolution versus creationism debate around that. It's like, I don't know. It's so ubiquitous. So what do you think you get out of this, Ryan? I could see it as being extremely good for like social skills and public speaking, basically. That's what I would be going for. But what do you think?
So it is interesting, right, that you mentioned that toys are kind of diminishing, or at least the new ones are not as cool as the old ones, or at least not to the same effect it would be in terms of like the delta. But I also think that, you know, every generation kind of has its own revolution. So there was like the engineering revolution, and that kind of led, you know, the advent of the iPhone and whatnot. So you did have all of these really cool things that came out, you know, worships their iPhone to some degree now. But I do think,
would say it's the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, that's just not the development that, you know, you had your industrial revolution that, you know, now is the Internet of Things and interconnectedness. So it's not the creation of new toys or even new equations. It's you're just interconnecting it, and, you know, that's why, you know, the search for the grand unification theory. It's not going to, you know, like, it's not going to be, you know, continued new toys or new theories at some point. It's just going to be, how do you connect it all?
Within the current scientific paradigm, it is not possible to have a unified model due to the Gödel incompleteness theorem being basically, for whatever reason, sacrosanct in the soft sciences.
But that's either way, the fourth industrial revolution that they say most of the experts, you know, especially the German, you know, like I go to the Siemens conference will be coming up soon, but all these reports from the manufacturing company, you know, it's saying Internet of Things is the big thing, and just you know, like the Amazon documentary that we're talking about, where they have you know, basically the most latest best gadgets in artificial intelligence and robotics in the Amazon factories, but none of those things are really new. I mean, they've had robotic arms and stuff for decades. They've had you know, almost everything you know, for many years now. It's, you know, the artificial intelligence, even a lot of that's been around for a while. It's just combining them you know, for a complete totality for something is what's new.
I mean, it's for sure that like artificial intelligence is not, I think it's been around since maybe the 40s or maybe a little bit later, like the 50s. So there have, been developments a long time ago that are kind of resurfacing today to some degree. But I kind of think that the direction, and at least I hope so, is that the next kind of industrial revolution, so to speak, is kind of going to be in the intersection between artificial intelligence and biology. Because I think that's the critical one for our time. Everyone wants to live forever, and I don't think that's very feasible. But I do think that kind of if you have a continual acceleration in hardware and software, then you're able to solve a lot harder problems than you were able to before. And if that were to be the case and you apply those to biological problems that you can model computationally and run like in silico experiments and whatnot, I think you'll be able to pull together some really cool things that are, in my opinion, more interesting and more important than just toy making.
Possible, and there's a lot of predicting how that's going to work is opens the door to a lot of theological questions. Certainly the main direction of it now is like prosthetic limbs, or maybe possibly like military technology or whatever reason you would internally connect decisions straight to a machine from a person's like neural signals. But I mean, most of the stuff is for that is like prosthetic limbs, where they have I'm not exactly sure of the science that well to explain it, but they have been able to connect the volition, where people could actively, through like neural connections to the machine, control what like a hand will do, or people who suffer other, God forbid, debilitating conditions, that they're able to interface through the computer to manifest things. The direction like cybernetics of interfacing the mind together with a machine is very questionable, because it comes to the hard problem of consciousness. We're saying, well, what is the mind? Is the mind the computer? I mean, is the mind related to the brain? Is the mind a spiritual thing? And so from a spiritual perspective, if you say like, no, that's never going to happen, because it's not actually how the mind and psyche works. It's not, you're never going to be able to connect it to a computer. You could connect the brain to have motor control over a prosthetic limb, because that's what the brain actually does. But something like consciousness and thought, maybe the brain is just a receptor, and it's not actually a function of the brain. The only function of the brain is the receptor from the spiritual realm of that function that doesn't occur there.
I think the prosthetic limb stuff is really cool, because it's very, very cutting edge, and that they're able to kind of actually, like you said, use volition to control limbs that they weren't able to before, those prosthetic limbs. My kind of interest, at least lately, has been in genetics. So like, for example, you can go and get your genome sequenced through 23andMe. Not that I recommend it, with all the problems associated with it that you can Google pretty easily. But if you do that, you can go and you can basically get a look through all of your different kind of variations and see kind of what you're susceptible to and predisposed to. So at least my guess for the future of kind of this field is that, at birth, you basically are automatically sequenced as a baby, and then they go and, do a little artificial intelligence analysis of, everything that's going to happen to you from a medical perspective, and then, do whatever they can to prevent that. Like in my case, I'm very highly susceptible to Alzheimer's. So hopefully, that's something that they'll be able to solve in the future. But, I think the first step is kind of knowing what you need to overcome, and then you can overcome it.
Yeah, well, you also how central the hard problem of consciousness is. So like as a doctor is saying, a lot of those things, have nothing to do with the hard problem of consciousness, like solving Alzheimer, maybe not. But, most of just giving people health, would be simple remedies that, you don't have to come across these deep philosophical questions, but at some extent, it really does permeate all fields and have repercussions in how you view it. And just you're saying, where do you look at as the seat of the soul, or the seat of cognition, and likely they're going to teach you some sort of materialistic form in school, even though that they'll admit that their materialistic explanation has a lot of holes in it. And may not even be however much value of truth that they're going to give it, but still they have to teach something. They're going to teach you the best of the knowledge that they have available now. But when you're personally looking at it, you say, I think the spiritual realms exist, and I'm going to continue with my understanding of it, with the soul and the spiritual realms, even though that's not what they're propagating in universities.
So I'm curious if you kind of, where you distinguish, for example, intelligence and soul, or like, I guess conventionally you might even be able to describe intelligence as like pattern recognition or something. Like you could take a bunch of mice and train them using like, I guess like a Pavlov technique to like trade stocks effectively, more so than you can humans. So I wonder if that kind of plays into this problem of consciousness, where like you can express intelligence or really impressive pattern recognition in I guess animals that we may not associate with having a soul, or maybe you do associate those kind of mice and stuff with having a soul.
So, saying if a mice is producing thought, that it's likely the thought of the mouse is occurring in, so to say, the soul. And I guess, Jennifer has her own understanding of it, but my understanding or leaning towards quantum mind, is the brain is a receptor that interfaces with the body. And, if you're looking at Hamarov and, Penrose and the microtubules as being the vehicle of, that reception and, how that works, or, however, on a quantum mind level, this, what the brain is receiving, or where that information the brain is receiving is coming from, is very complicated. And, but you're saying, no, it's not, it doesn't happen in the brain in the same way that the human brain is a receiver to, the soul. The mouse brain is a receiver to the soul. And from this purely scientific method of it, Hamarov is saying nerve cells have these microtubules, and even plants, any animal organism that has these nerve cells has these microtubules, and these microtubules are capable of eliciting, the effects of the quantum. Sorry, my terminology is slipping me right now. But whatever that case is, that so of course, the mouse brain is operating the same way in the human brain as a receptor to some sort of spiritual realm that's communicating to the mouse through its brain. I don't know if you, at least you conceptually understand what I'm trying to say. And then for a slightly own take.
I follow, because I've read a little bit of what Church of Entropy has said about that, and I do kind of understand you're explaining using microtubules as kind of the basis for this, as opposed to just kind of basic motion, which is kind of how we understand it from I guess modern scientific point of view.
Consciousness is like, okay, like a mouse thinks, and a mouse is, it's like, should I go right or should I go left? And if that's instinct, but if there's a decision process, is that decision process happening in electrical circuits in the brain, or is that decision process being transferred from the material realm to the spiritual realm, where the decision is made, so to say, in the spiritual realm, and then the decision that's decided in the spiritual realm is implicated back in the material realm. And from the it's possible that it's a quantum phenomenon that's happening through microtubules, or or the more classic, like Descartes is just pure dualism. But if you're just trying to conceptualize, and if you're materialist, you're thinking that that the thought is occurring in the brain, it's a deep thing that I'm saying differently. I'm saying, no, according to my understanding, thought does not happen in the brain. Thought is some process that happens in the spiritual realm. And that would be the same for a mouse or even a plant, or any organism that exhibits some level of what we're going to call consciousness.
I think maybe a better, I don't totally subscribe to this, right? And I got to go through a little more Penrose and Hamarov myself. Doooovid directed me the links a few months ago, and I haven't watched all of these conferences yet. But one particular scientist in biology I'm kind of fond of, who I think is, I don't think he's totally correct, but I think he's beating around the right bushes, is Rupert Sheldrake, and he wrote a good book called Science Set Free. And he talks like you do. He also wrote a book called like How Does a Dog know when its master's coming home? He wrote papers about that in the 90s, and he has this belief that consciousness exists along morphic fields that aren't that are non-localized, and I think that ultimately is the right direction to think about these things. Now, I don't know if Rupert Sheldrake's models are completely correct, so I'm not gonna go with that fully. But he's someone to look into.
Yeah, these questions are similar to the ether question in previous, just even classical physics of where do these things happen? They need some sort of stable realm to happen, and you're saying, okay, there has to be an ether, and basically consciousness is saying like, no, there's an ether, and that ether is consciousness. It's kind of like a modern formation, and that's
I don't think that's a good idea. Ether is just nothingness, right? You can prove ether exists through the atomic structure, because the electron is more diffuse than the proton. Therefore, there's got to be something in the background, and that's ether. It's the nothingness.
Well, I mean, that's maybe a modern, but I mean, previous, when they were first looking for the ether, they thought the ether wasn't nothingness, that there was some sort of like firmament, there was some sort of metaphysical ether that existed. Like ether is not just a fancy way of saying nothingness.
This Sheldrake author, I guess, or scientist, I'm just quickly skimming the Wikipedia page he has, and it says that he posits that memory is inherent in nature and that natural systems inherit a collective memory from all previous things of their kind. And I want to juxtapose this against kind of a point that was made. I kind of brought up this book with you a little bit ago, Doooovid, the Roots of Jewish
Before you say
Conscious.
they're saying that you're adding your ether concept, was in essence just to say the dimensions, that you needed some sort of ether to have a three-dimensional system, and you're saying that conception, you just say, okay, so there's not just an ether that somehow holds the cosmos together in a three-dimensional way, or more than that in different understandings, but there's an ether that includes things like memory and consciousness and other functions that so it's a very difficult way to see how to frame and understand even what we're talking about, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, so I guess this is kind of that one definition of ether as opposed to the more modern sense of the word. But the argument that was being made is that at least from this text, is that when Moses received the commandments and the whole kind of episode of the burning bush was like an expression of the collective unconscious, but like in a mass sense. And then there's another author who basically argues that kind of that whole episode was because I guess Moses had accidentally made some DMT or something. And I don't know if you've heard of this theory by a Israeli scholar, but I guess you can almost put the three together if you try hard enough. I don't know if you have any considerations on any three of those or the three together, but I'm curious if that kind of is something you're interested in, or it's just like a total tangent.
Yeah, I mean, if you connected, you say if you did have some sort of underlying spiritual presence that let's say equally pervades the whole cosmos, is it possible to have it concentrate, or could you have the whole collective of the whole consciousness that pervades all of the cosmos also concentrate in a specific area? And if you're looking at that as some sort of representation of the the divine presence at the burning bush, or even later the divine presence resting in the temple, the Shekinah or the Holy Spirit, there are a lot of mystics who will try to frame it in that understanding of is there some sort of spiritual ether pervading everything, and then at the same time could you have like a concentrate of the sum totality of all the spirituality collected together in one place. So I mean, yeah, I mean that's certainly the the type language that the mystics would use, and even the dynamics, the science of miracles, the science of the interaction, the answer of prayer, and these things would that's how the Kabbalistic system essentially works.
And that's interesting. I mean, I guess there's
Systems. You have the Vedic systems, you got Kabbalistic systems. You could kind of have just like pop action reaction, law of attraction type ideas, and then you say, or is there like like the true science, or is it like a multiple truth type things where there's actually multiple sciences, and the multiple sciences in fact contradict each other.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you compare like gravity from a mechanical perspective versus from a quantum perspective, you're gonna, I guess, run into one of those multi-truth conundrums that I guess maybe your theory can solve. I just don't know enough about it to kind of say it does or doesn't conclusively. But
well, it's a work. I'm saying if you it's more a reframing of the issue. I'm not saying I'm not necessarily solving something. I'm just reframing the conceptualization of what truth is. In a different way, because I'm not like I didn't discover like a new force or gravity or anything like that. I'm just it's just a conceptual framework for truth. But like I don't have any Doooovid entropy equations or math. Maybe maybe we'll come up with those, but as of now, it's just the framework.
But if you have a framework to look at it through that kind of explains why you can have both perspectives and both perspectives can still be right, then I think it is fair to say that it kind of does solve a kind of conundrum there, even if you're not actually writing equations or unifying them from a scientific perspective. If you can kind of explain why they do work, even without having to go into those nitty-gritty specifics about that exact phenomenon. Maybe this is just what's the word, like a word like a semantic issue.
Yeah, I mean it's complicated because you were saying like what are the current problems with the modern science. So you're saying okay, we're all still students. I'm saying you're student university. Gandalf's constantly giving people book reports to do or whatever. I'm saying like we're all still students. There's so much to learn, but at the same time. We might have learned enough to see kind of like what's on the horizon, where are the big gaps of knowledge, what are the big problems and the big questions that demand answers, and and then even can you conceptually reframe something that will allow you to acquire and accumulate more understanding, or combine the different fields of knowledge that you're accumulating. That's hard to accumulate and combine knowledge when the knowledge that you accumulate contradicts. And if you have a framework that would allow you to combine contrary conflicting information, certainly that would be beneficial. And saying okay, but is it true, is it science, or is it just a utility of helping a person be a philosopher, because it's difficult to maintain multiple conflicting ideas in your head at the same time. But then I think like saying no, maybe it's not just a utility way of trying to be a good student. You have to fundamentally flip and just say I never really thought about what truth actually is, and the more I've examined truth, the more I've seen that what I used to think or how people have conceptualized truth in reality is not accurate, and truth is much more complicated than we previously thought.
I have I guess a totally tangential question, if that's all right. But the reason I found your channel and by extension Church of Entropies was because you were talking to a lot of these I guess internet guys who discuss things like the Jewish question and kind of alt-right philosophy. And I don't know, the reason that I kind of found that myself was because I've been noticing that a lot of my friends who I grew up with who were more conservative in nature ended up kind of gravitating towards these like Nick Fuentes types characters, and some more kind of extreme people are just, abandoning e-celebs altogether. And I'm curious if that's something you've noticed in real life, or maybe that's just like a microcosm, or like is this philosophy really on the rise? Like, is there a reason to be worried as like, a nice 20-year-old Jewish student, or is it just the internet kind of creating a few odd characters here and there?
No, I mean it's pretty like you follow anti-Semitism, identity culture, or just the breakdown economics of society. I don't think you'd be worried, but you should be mindful. And identity is important. Like, saying like, who are you? What does it mean to what is your identity? Like, are you Jewish, American, white? What are your opinions on these very issues? And you could just not think about them, and saying you could just do good in school and advance, and get a career and a family, and never have a deep understanding of identity. But it's probably one of the most important issues, and you don't have to make a career out of it. It's something that interested me and I enjoyed, and wanted to take the opportunity to be involved in streaming. But like science and these ideas are also so you'll have to examine how you're going to go a part of it. If you're in university, there'll probably be a BDS campaign. There's probably a lot of debates, and people are making difficult decisions. And like me and Jennifer have done a lot of work to try to scientifically model group conflict. So you have Kevin McDonald and John Frances Garepi and Dutton and people Richard Spencer are supporting that are producing what we're going to call racial science that generally is frowned upon. Although when you're in university, there is certain, like, you're going to notice a component of that is obvious and even taught as part of, especially if you're in bioinformatics, like you're talking about the health outcome disparities between like African Americans and whites, or like Jewish genetic diseases. Someone was arguing like there's no such thing as like the Jewish nation. And it's like, well, like what about like genetic like a Jew is a Jew. Like if you're a Jew, whether you're religious or not, you still have a disproportionate chance of having certain genetic likelihoods of certain God forbid diseases or whatever. So it's important. You got to place your priorities, how much you want to study these things. You just think like, do you care about your religion? If you're spiritual, but it's saying like, do you want to know your own religion from like Claire and her secular chronism, and saying, well, you should learn traditional Judaism, you should learn Hebrew and the chant, and be comfortable going in synagogue and participating, and so these are all things you have to work through on your own and figure out. And then if you enjoy discourse, saying, are you going to put yourself openly on the forefront as like someone who's going to partake in these discussions and represent the Jewish people, even in blood sports, let alone more friendly arenas.
Yeah, I mean, I've read like McDonald a little bit, because that was kind of the one that everyone points you to if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And I don't know, like all of this has kind of made me more interested in pursuing Judaism and kind of learning more about it from more Jewish works than from people like McDonald, because I don't know if that's the best place to learn about it, if that makes sense. But I will think about that.
Well, it's if you don't have a strong identity, like if you identify, like, I got my yarmulke, like walking, like I'm a Jew, and I assume people, connect my identity to that. But if internally, you're not saying like my fundamental identity is a Jew, and then you have the science of other people who, basically it's somewhat like a question of free will, and how much does being a Jew limit your free will, and saying that it's predictive in your behavior a substantial amount of things just with that identity piece of information, and it could cause quite a bit of dissonance when other people talk about your identity and you don't have the answers, and you say, well, these other people are making these statements about my identity, and I haven't done enough research into thought into my own identity to know what to do with it. And then you might say there's a truth to the science of group strategy, that, okay, like we're both Jews, like there is some genetic or spiritual or sociological, you're talking like bioinformatics or social, something that you could statistically demonstrate, and that there is some sort of overall group strategy where people from the same group subconsciously act as a collective, largely for our own self-benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I have bought into the kind of the premise of group evolutionary strategy to one degree or another. I mean, I argue that the strategy that they're proposing is probably not the best one for Jews in America. Like, how they always joke, or they're not joking, but I'm joking. When they always say that like Jews are trying to replace white people or something and all that crap. But it's like if that's the strategy, I would argue that's probably not a very good one, because that gets people mad, and then that has downstream consequences. Yeah,
if it's somewhat determinative that Jews are going to act in that way. It's not that Jews got together and said what's the best way to advance our people, and you say, oh, multiculturalism being pro-immigration. It's something that's happened from breeding strategy over generations, that is determinative that Jews act in that manner, and it's not something that it's like, God forbid, Deborah Lipstadt, like they're saying you can't reason someone out of anti-Semitism because they didn't become an anti-Semite because of logic, and whether you take the Deborah Lipstadt talking points. But saying like Jews didn't become Jews because of logic. Jews became Jews because of generations and generations of breeding strategy. So even if you look in the mirror and self-recognize like, oh, I act in these ways, it still could be even near impossible for you to be able to change yourself from acting in those patterns.
that makes sense. I mean, I don't buy the Deborah Lipstadt kind of argument that they weren't reasoned into anti-Semitism. I guess I could argue that those reasons may be flawed, but I don't think that these people are like sick or diseased or something, and ended up
McDonald,
kind of.
The reasons don't really matter. It's group conflict, and it's group conflict
Right.
usually over the scarcity of resources. So it's not necessarily like, okay, like we decided that the Gentile, the Goyim are like this, and the Goyim, a group of Goyim decided the Jews are like that. It's just that there's been a conflict over resources, and that resource led to a conflict, and it took the certain form in different areas and times of that it did. But in essence, group conflict is could have multiple different causes, but I mean, McDonald's usually over resources or over dominance or over some sort of tangible object.
Doooovid, you should tell them about your theory about the Jews and the Germans and the electrical grid.
Well, yeah, I mean, I made the comment like, okay, what's the German strategy? We don't know, like so I was saying, well, there's some connection between like Germans and electricity, because like I know like the Germans dominate electricity, and like anytime I'm dealing with like electrical engineers or electricity, like I'm dealing with Germans. Although like to work out like what's to say like, okay, like what's the Jewish strategy, and it's unclear exactly. And you say, okay, like immigration and multiculturalism, like my clip on originally on Brundlecast with the red elephants, and then on Adam Green, where it's like, well, obviously like multiculturalism and immigration benefits the Jews. So it may not benefit white people at large, but it benefits the Jews, and the reasons are quite clear. And like if you're a Jew, you could be like, well, I'm not sure promoting immigration is kind of the best thing, but you could say, well, it's kind of like our group strategy does pretty much benefit from multicultural immigration. And so for the Germans, I'm trying to clarify, like, how does electricity come in? Like, is electricity the German strategy, or what is it about the German strategy that like the Jews dominate banking, but the Germans dominate electricity? But like, no, I haven't really
because you were saying something about without the Jews, the Germans didn't have electricity, and without the Germans, the Jews didn't have electricity either. So that implied there was some sort of collaboration. And again, this
obviously, I mean, that was the banking, that the financing of laying the infrastructure was done through the cooperation of Jews and Germans.
Sorry, can you repeat that last bit?
Well, I'm saying it was large, banking and finances, that you couldn't have had the laying of the infrastructure for the electrification of Europe without banking. And so the Jews largely played the role in managerial and banking and financing. So you got the company, but that led to the electrification of Europe and eventually the electrification of the whole world. And it could be that still largely, no matter where the world you go, that you'll see, like, if you go to your electrical plant or the people in charge of electricity, you're basically going to find Germans. Even if you're in Africa or Asia, like even if you're in an African country and like you go, like, where's your power plant? Like, like if there's not Germans there, like it was probably helped set up by Germans.
I think
This
there's
is kind of like, yeah.
theory.
No, sorry. No, it's okay. You can go.
I think there's actually something to that theory. I would extend it in a similar, maybe deeper direction. I think there's also a reason that there's a complicated relationship between Germans and Jews too, because I think in different vectors, or I shouldn't say vectors, manifestations, I think Germans and Jews tend to both be a bit on the neurotic side. Like there's a neuroticism to German idealism and certain tendencies of thought, and there's the neuroticism to I wouldn't consider it idealism, but to a certain particular Jewish logic of thinking that has its own manifestation, and they can work together in parallel in certain ways, but they can come to conflict on other issues. And I think that conflict is, as I think someone in the chat said, or would probably agree, Iman. I think it comes, it's subconscious in a very deep way. I mean, that's why you had, Bolshevism versus Nazism essentially dominate the interwar period and lead from one world war to another. But how that happened, I'm eventually going to probably figure, I think, out a working model for how that happened, but it's something that's on my mind.
The way that it comes to function is that the Jews are essentially assuming a certain moral burden for the activities of the German through the religious institution as well as the financing institution. So it's like the Germans want to do all this stuff, but they don't know how to get started, so the Jews help them get started, and then the Jews sort of face the consequences more directly because they're on that level. So it's like the moral burden of what the Germans do is sort of carried by the Jews in a way. Not sure if that makes it clear. I think it's like think about it as like a delegation of duty kind of thing, or shared duties, complementary duty.
Well, and there's a further paradox behind it too, insofar as, the Jews assume the moral burden, but they assume it from a priestly position that is somewhat removed and or hidden, but ultimately because they assume the karmic duty, spiritually facing God as they understand God, ultimately it brings them from, to use a Heideggerian phrase, in an alepheic moment, in a moment of unconcealing that is revelation, it brings them from behind to the forefront when they least expect it.
It infantilizes Germans. I don't know exactly what it does to Jews because it's like I don't have enough info, but I definitely know it's an infantilization caused by the Christian religion of people's moral compass.
And the Christianization of Germany was a catastrophe for the German people. There's a reason why, if you look at all the major countries of Europe, I mean, they generally fall, especially post-Reformation, they're either Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, or a state church Protestant. I mean, Germany, the conflict between paganism, which held out, especially in the Baltic lands and in parts of Prussia up until the 1300s, you had that wing, lasted longer than almost anywhere else outside of Scandinavia. You had Protestantism, which was generally the central and western provinces that aligned to Luther early on in the Reformation. And then the southern part of Germany, particularly Bavaria and maybe parts of Swabia, stayed Catholic for a very long time. And Bismarck, to help consolidate the new Prussian-centered national state, had to launch a Kulturkampf, which was an extremely traumatic event in the 1870s and 1880s for much of the German polity. It basically, threatened to strangle the Prussian state that had tried to unify things after wars with Austria and France. It threatened to strangle it in its bed because Bavarians stubbornly stuck to Catholicism for a very long time. And if you look at, like the rise of the NSDAP, and Hitler and whatnot, although most of the early entourage were a bunch of people from Bavaria who were Catholics or ex-Catholics, in the elections in 1928, 1930, and then 32 and 33, all of their support came from mostly small town burghers and farmers, as opposed to the industrial proletariat from the north, from the Protestant areas, despite the fact that the early founders were all ex-Catholics. So there's this very strange, religious war within Germany between the Protestant, Catholic, and pagan parts of the soul that doesn't really totally exist in other European states that had conflicts over religion, including intra-denominational conflicts. So I look at, Christianity did, in my view, more damage to the Germans than any other group in Europe, but save perhaps for the Irish.
If you want to, take it more to a meta level of the scientific understanding of group strategy, and say, like, okay, you might have a natural group genetic strategy of the group, but occasionally, through a series of events, or just one thing leading to another, that a group will adapt a different group strategy, and then the effects of having your intrinsic strategy displaced and being replaced by another group strategy, and how that morphs and forms over periods of times. But just looking for a scientific model or method to understand how these things work, to understand these issues.
So maybe, like, as an example that we can look at this through, like, for example, when you had like periods of big banking, like the Medicis and whatnot, and I think that's like 1400s Florence, obviously lending money was outlawed by the church. They still had ways around that and whatnot, but I imagine at least that they did kind of need Jews to be able to do a good portion of that work. So I wonder if that kind of interplays is like.
Well, hold on right there. Touch very, very. It's very important. I want to be very technical with you for a second. The church outlawed usury, right? But they certainly participated with many Near Eastern Jewish interests behind the scenes to funnel their own coffers. They did scams like indulgences, which were essentially usurious without being usurious, technically. But they did it anyway. And the church always made lots of deals.
We all know Christianity is a front for Jewish usury, guys. That's what the point of Christianity was. Monopoly on usury for the Jews.
Yeah, I think it does. I'm not sure if it's the Fourth Lateran Council or whatever, but there might be a subject matter for a different stream. But we're just talking like and saying the endless historical study and review to know all this information. But you just have a framework for how you could have multiple examples. So if you're talking about Germans being Christian or something, of having the group strategy displaced, whatever their natural group strategy is, and it may be completely lost genetically, what the intrinsic natural, like a Jew who returns to Israel and say, like, okay, genetically you might be acting a certain way here in America, but if you went to Israel, like, you would naturally fall in to your intrinsic genetic group strategy. And then there's different elements of saying, okay, just the fact that we're speaking English, none of us are Anglo, saying whatever our ethnic composition is. So like whatever our group strategy is, like saying our natural language or method of discourse has been displaced, and we're using the group strategy of a different people, mean the Anglos, and we're speaking their language, and all the various different phenomena and parts of our life that saying what's our intrinsic group strategy if we were naturally being the who we were, how we would act, versus the way we've trained ourselves to act through however reasons, and and where those various strategies, kind of like the history of ideas, the history of strategies. And then, obviously that could be
I
applied
don't know if you
to.
can count a language as a strategy. Maybe a willingness to learn a language for whatever reason might be part of some strategy, but I think this strategy's got to comprise more than just a language. English
It's a demonstration that you're
for certain things, right?
if you're not speaking your natural language, it's a demonstration that you're basically functioning according to someone else's strategy.
Nah, that kind of implies there's like an English group strategy, and I don't really think that there is.
Well, I mean, all groups have a strategy.
Yeah, but no, I'm talking about English as a language, not as in like the people from England. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, I mean, saying the fact that we're speaking English is because we're generally acting in accordance to the Anglo group strategy.
I don't think you can say that.
And he was saying from the perspective of the Anglos, that their group strategy would include displacing the group strategy of, billions of people or hundreds of millions of people across the world to operate according to their strategy. Then how does that benefit their strategy? All these things are to be considered.
Like the history of Deutsche Amerikaners.
It's probably not intended. Like a lot of these things, happen. Whatever reason it didn't happen because it's not the nature that like the Anglos or group of leaders got together and decided a strategy. Strategies don't. That's not how they're formed. Strategies are more organically formed over the decision making of the masses of people over multiple generations, not through the collective bodies or decisions of elites.
Isn't English a Germanic language though? So you could say, well, it's actually really a Germanic survival strategy. It's like a language.
Well, connected. I mean,
but a language alone isn't really enough to say that, to identify something as a survival strategy.
Well, it's a family. So you have obviously you have 70 nations, and you have language families, and you have nation families, and some nations are more connected than others. So English and German are from the same language family, but they're different language, they're different nations. But the distance between Germans and English is a lot less between the distance between Jews. Or
that's the limitations of this group evolutionary strategy framework, is that the boundary is sometimes not self-evident what exactly it is.
Yeah, but it's probably evident enough to be useful, and it's probably in whatever needs of accuracy you could probably provide. So depending on what you're using, if you had formulas for, you would determine your accuracy needed, and the amount of accuracy needed would depend on how deep you go into finding the data. How much data you're going to acquire to give yourself the accuracy needed.
It's not just about how much data, it's about how you interpret the data, right? Like, what does it mean to receive a particular datum? That's the real skill of it, right? Collecting large amounts of data is easier than ever, but understanding what that data means has perhaps never been more difficult.
Well, it's also going to be dynamic, so it's not like, okay, like all Jews have like one simple strategy that they all comply to, and like any given person might have elements of other strategies within them. You might have it's where does the strategy reside? Does it reside, so to say, in the GNA? And
there is no such thing. It's a pattern people are recognizing because we're compelled through our imperatives of consciousness to seek out patterns in order to make sense of the world, because we're selected for intelligence.
Yeah,
that's why your
it's going to
capacity,
be nature and nurture.
Your capacity to make predictions within this framework depends on whether you can actually define these boundaries between quote groups in any meaningful way. And there will be some cases where you can, and some where you might not be able to. Because there's the issue of recombinance, right? Like, which came first, the culture or the genetics, right? There's a certain recombinance there that's near impossible to sort of decontort the cause or disentangle the causality between these two forces.
Yeah, but it's like I said, a lot of these things you need to solve the hard problem of consciousness to you really understand what the truth or to solve, but you can still produce useful functions or correlations or even possibly exact more exact by looking into, even if you can't answer some of these fundamental questions. I'm kind of following this here. I'm not sure if you guys anything else you want to discuss, or if you want to move on to closing word. I'm having a hard time keeping my thoughts straight because I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm getting a little tired myself. It's been a long day. I was up at 6:30. Gandalf's got big things in the next 2 weeks to look forward to. It's a surprise for you all. No one on this panel knows what they are. You're gonna have to all find out yourself. I've been thinking about Doooovid value proposition a lot. I was resistant. I didn't know why. You should listen if when it comes to streaming, either consuming streams or doing streams, appearing on streams, whatnot. Listen to Church of Entropy and also listen to Doooovid. It's part of like the initiation process. And one of the things Doooovid talks a lot about, I don't know, it took a while for it to register for whatever reason, maybe because of my own Germanic stubbornness about everything, because I'm pretty pig-headed, and I do love my bacon, is value proposition. What's the value proposition you aim to put out there from streaming and also get from streaming? And part of that is part of figuring that out is really important, particularly if someone like yourself who's very young, very bright, and interested in liminal ideas, limits, ideas at the limits of what people can understand, so you can explore new frontiers of knowledge and discovery. Discovering your own value proposition, especially at your tender age, so you can be ahead of the curve, will be an important step for you to consider. And I think you're probably further along in that than you know. It's just about coming to that inner realization. And I'm cautiously optimistic that you'll do it. And I'm not an optimistic person, so take that as a compliment.
I'm glad to hear that, and I'm looking forward to what you're putting out. Thanks again for having me on. I really enjoy kind of now waiting for these Sunday night streams to get to pick your brains, because you're all very interesting characters, and I've been exposed to you all through different kind of perspectives, and definitely curious to learn more about kind of Church's theory through the quantum perspective, and discuss a little bit more about multi-truth with Doooovid. And I mean, Gandalf seems to know a little bit of everything, so it's all very exciting for me. So thank you guys.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and I love seeing you show up on our panels. I think you're an exciting person.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and it's good we're trying to shift a little more science focused than politics focused, and like Bernie Sanders or whatever. I didn't have too much more insight to add than with all the talking heads, although it's likely I'll come back to more politics, but I'm glad that we're taking a more science directed one in the science of spirituality. So thanks for joining, participating. Anything Jennifer, hopefully next week you'll have your channel back and all taken care of. So that I'm glad we did this. Thanks for coming on. Anything you want to conclude with? Any streams or anything that you got coming up?
Yeah, great show. Thanks for coming back, Ryan. And as always, Gandalf, nice to have you. Thanks for hosting it this week, too. We appreciate that. I'll probably be restreaming this once my channel comes back, so that'll be signed back online. But please subscribe in the meantime. I can drop the link. And if you enjoyed this show, we have them every Sunday on my channel. So looking forward to the next one, and really excited to see that the conversation is progressing in a spiritual and also scientific direction. So really looking forward to continuing the convo. Thanks again, everyone, and thank you to the audience members for participating in the chat. Okay, yeah, have a great night, everyone. Sorry the last few weeks I've been kind of tired, and thanks to Gandalf and the co-host for kind of carrying these streams as I've been tired, and I'm kind of excited. We've been talking about these things for almost a year, and you could see that there's a lot of development on them and a lot of bringing together different ideas from different fields, and
yeah, I think it's exciting. I think, we might be on the verge of, maybe publishing something, or you're reaching next higher level. So have a great week, and look forward to next week.
Blessings all.